He's immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
What? This is the end game.
All right, everybody. It is Friday, February 21st, 2025, the 33rd day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Oh, let's be reasonable. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Another week concluding. Donald Trump still, by all accounts, sitting on top, but not by all accounts, actually. I'm overestimating the number of accounts. In fact, let's see what the mainstream media is convincing people of this week. MSNBC, this is the Maddow blog from today. As Trump's support falters, some Republicans start inching away. Huh, how about that? Republicans are already giving up on Donald Trump. The president may demand unflinching loyalty from GOP lawmakers, but his party's wall suddenly has some visible cracks. Are you seeing the cracks? I bet you're not. I'm not seeing the cracks. I've seen no cracks anywhere. No cracks to be found. But the communists are, in fact, finding them. The conventional wisdom, he says on Capitol Hill, is that congressional Republicans in both chambers have effectively created a cult of personality devoted to Donald Trump. As the argument goes, these GOP lawmakers, some true believers, some too afraid to pretend they're not true believers, a little backwards there, see themselves as little more than sycophantic presidential employees whose job it is to praise, honor, and obey the man in the Oval Office. The conventional wisdom is easy to believe, but it's also worth appreciating the degree to which some Republicans in Congress are starting to put some distance, not a lot, but a discernible distance, between themselves and Trump. And they go through Republican Gary Palmer, who last week said lawmakers need to remind Trump that Congress has a role. Not only does he need to work with Congress, in some of these, he has to work with Congress. What? Who knows? Ohio's Troy Balderson said some of the executive orders were getting out of control. Big headlines all over the place. These headlines, these Republicans breaking with Trump. Congress has to decide whether or not the Department of Education goes away. Not the president, not Elon Musk. Congress decides. Oh, nice to see you asserting yourself, Mr. Balderdash. And then, of course, the polls. The polls for Donald Trump, they're collapsing. That is what Politico told us yesterday. Warning signs for Trump and a new polling. His honeymoon may be wearing off. New polls show that a majority of Americans say he has overstepped his presidential authority. His ratings are underwater. 47 to 52 in the CNN poll, 45 53 in the Post. How could it happen? The support is eroding because they're worried that Donald Trump has overstepped his power in his attempts to reshape the federal government. And these attempts have been driven by Elon Musk. So it's that Trump-Musk partnership. It's just terrible. Americans are skeptical of Trump's handling of the high prices of goods, and they're worried about his tariffs. Trump said Is this today? This is probably reference. Oh, no, this was updated today with this. I was like, I didn't see this earlier. Trump said this morning he's had the best polling numbers he's ever had. And we might as well go to Truth Social. Why wouldn't we go to Truth Social? Right now, we'd better just read Trump's statement now that they brought it up. And it was a fun one. He said, I won the presidential election in a landslide. Won all 7 swing states, the popular vote, and all 50 states shifted Republican, a record. And now I have the best polling numbers I've ever had. The Democrats, run by broken down losers like James Carville, who we're going to come back to, whose, little typo or misspelling or maybe intentional, weak of mind and body, are going crazy and just don't know what to do. They've lost their confidence and spirit. They have lost their minds. We are going to have big wins for our country and make America great again. It's already happening, and we'll get bigger, and better than ever before. Bitter is what you get when you combine bigger and better. The very reputable New York Intelligencer says Trump's poll numbers are eroding and could collapse over inflation. You've heard it all before. Of course, the walls, they're closing in. As the CBS survey showed, sizable majorities of Americans already oppose new tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and Europe, with tariffs on China being an exception to low levels of support for that key element of Trump's economic policy agenda. And the same poll showed 66% of respondents agreeing that Trump's focus on lowering prices is not enough. Oh, it's possible that his final term in office, Trump won't care as much about those polling numbers as he has before, because he doesn't have to run again. Although, yesterday, he mentioned to a group of Black Americans gathered at the White House for a Black History Month event, maybe I should run again. Hey, maybe he should. It'll be our decision. How about that? Maybe we won't need a president at that point. But apparently, all the goodwill, all the good vibes, all the progress Donald Trump has been making, it's all just falling apart. And I've got to sneeze, so hold on. Wow. Sometimes they just take you by storm. So we're being told by the communists that Donald Trump is losing support, and not only losing support among the American people, but losing support among Republicans. And that's the important thing always. Here we have CNN, a Georgia congressman. He had a town hall, a man by the name of Rich McCormick. And this is the American people giving their backlash to Trump Republicans.
Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So I would like to know, rather, the people would like to know what you, congressmen, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
And the crowd goes wild. Oh, it feels so grassrootsy.
I'm not going to give you my best foghorn leghorn response to that. But what I was, you can go ahead and sit down. Thank you. When you talk about tyranny, when you talk about presidential power, I remember having the same discussion with Republicans when Biden was elected.
Oh, no, it couldn't be. How dare you?
The funny thing is, you're sitting here and a lot of you would probably say those January 6s who are yelling just as loud as you, who are upset just like you. I don't think executive privilege should be as strong as it is. I think we're out of bounds right now. I think your direct representation, whether you like me or not, I'm the closest thing you have to a representative. Your senator's not going to be as representative as me. And the president's not going to be as representative as me when it comes to you, the people in this district. Likewise, I think state government needs to be more powerful than federal government. It used to be that federal funds only made up 1/3 of the money spent, and states was 2/3. It's more representative of your money and your money spent. That's better. Always push government down to the local level because you'll get better representation.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that was on CNN's front page today. They want everybody to see that and everybody to know that Donald Trump is not doing that well. The American people are pushing back. They're fighting back against Donald Trump's overreach. He's just gone too far this time. The walls are closing in. Now, the funny thing is that the Democrat establishment, the Uniparty left, is getting help from their friends on the Uniparty right. And people just are having a hard time seeing it this way, of course, because they believe that all of these people actually are our friends. This is the very based and red-pilled, gay, podcast bro globalist, Douglas Murray, who's the champion of the decade-old immigration, how should I say it? The immigration narrative in Europe. And I'm not describing it as a narrative to diminish it in any way. There certainly is illegal immigration. There's a global slave trade happening all over the world. And the quote unquote Western cultures are subject to an invasion that is being led by the very global regime that Douglas Murray supports. And so that's the contradiction in what all of the Uniparty right podcast brosphere is constantly doing. And so I'm going to present a couple examples of that as we go along. But this is the cover of the New York Post. Their print edition had this article on the cover. Mr. President, says Douglas Murray, Putin is the dictator. And 10 Ukraine-Russia war truths we ignore at our peril. So you see, the Russia-Ukraine war narrative has been falling apart over the last week or so. Donald Trump is not saying the right things. He's abandoning our allies in Europe. He's abandoning our ally, Ukraine, that very sovereign democracy that we've been protecting for these 3 years. Somehow, we're just going to pull out and we're going to leave Europe and Ukraine to fend for themselves. And of course, they're not actually able to do that. So it's being framed as we are abandoning them so Putin can take over all of Europe. That is the regime's absolute worst nightmare. And that's how they've been describing it. And so we've talked about that a number of times this week on the show. But let's go through quickly Douglas Murray's article here in the Post. This has been a dizzying and disorienting week in international diplomacy, one with wild implications for Ukraine, the future of America's standing in the world, and President Trump's legacy. Well, no, none of those things, really. America's going to be just fine. President Trump's legacy is going to be just fine. We are 1 month in. 1 month. Do you think anybody's going to be thinking about this week in his presidency in some negative way 4 years from now? Oh, you know, that third week in February when he started calling the comedic actor in Ukraine a dictator. Oh, that's when America just turned on him. They were like, no, we need to win that little Nazi war over there. These people are ridiculous. Trump is absolutely right in wanting to end the bloodshed in Ukraine. And of course, Douglas Murray, he's got a proper British accent. The suffering has been appalling and the stalemate brutal. But in the furious mix of wild opinions this week from the White House down, there are at least 10 truths that every American voter must hang on to. Imagine Murdoch News wanting to make sure that every American who thought, you know what, I'm a little too conservative for the New York Times, all those people have to know this. In Trump's rush to end the bloodshed, these are also the truths against which any deal will be judged and which will define him when the history books are written. And of course, this is always the threat from the regime. You're going to be on the wrong side of history. Now, if you've read my piece that is up in my Substack called The Sides of History, you'll know what I think about all this. They talk about being on the wrong side of history because they intend to write the history. The same regime stays in power. It pulls a switcheroo, presents itself as the victim who then rose above to win and eventually, of course, becomes the victim again next time it needs to rewrite the history. To ignore these truths or not treat them with the gravity they deserve will also have enormous consequences for decades to come. This guy, Douglas Murray, by the way, is a clown, but people take him really seriously because he's got a very proper accent. He talks quickly, and he has memorized entire segments of the central narrative and can just spit them out on call. That is what we take as the equivalent of knowing and understanding things. Truth number one, Vladimir Putin started this war despite what Trump said days ago. And there's Putin starting a war. Look at him. So war starting with his face all Putin-y. So absurd. And Trump just yelling all stupid and whatnot. We get it. Truth number two, Russia is fighting for conquest. Truth number three, Ukraine is fighting for independence. Most Ukrainians do not want to be part of Russia. Well, all the ones who have voted to be part of Russia in the Donbass, the whole eastern third of Ukraine, where this supposed war is being fought, they've already decided to be part of Russia. And Crimea decided to be part of Russia 10 years ago. So which Ukrainians is he talking about? The liberal majority in Kyiv, which is Europe's San Francisco, a lot like how Tel Aviv is the Middle East's San Francisco. So you might be able to find a majority there, but that's not really representative. Although Douglas Murray might prefer Europe's San Francisco and the Middle East's San Francisco. Truth number four, Ukrainians are not Russians. Well, why don't we ask them? Because some of them definitely are. And the people of Slavic ethnicity, many of them do consider themselves Russians. And of course, all of Ukraine used to be Russia. So, Truth number five, Putin is a dictator. Truth number six, Zelensky is not a dictator. He has a 57% approval rating, not the 4% Trump claimed. Remember, we discussed that the other day. Douglas Murray, the brilliant intellectual, super based and red-pilled gay conservative, is citing that weird USAID-funded Ukrainian think tank and their poll that they put together in a matter of hours. Hey, we asked 1,000 people what they think. Here it is. It's not the 4% like Donald Trump said. What a jerk Donald Trump is. He's pretending Volodymyr Zelensky's not that popular. The regime, by the way, now admits that Valery Zaluzhny is more popular than Zelensky. So Zelensky, who is kind of our boy Volodymyr over in Ukraine, totally under control at this point. I would suggest that he is playing Judas Goat here and doing a superb job of it. They want to replace him with Valery Zaluzhny. By all means, go right ahead. If Zelensky could win an election, why did he cancel the elections last year? It's a good question. My pal John Harold pointed out yesterday on Twitter and on Telegram that another friend of ours, Matt Byron, suggested that perhaps Vladimir Putin could run in a Ukrainian election and win. And if you think about what a referendum to become part of Russia would be for the regions of the Donbass and for Crimea, they were signing up to have Vladimir Putin be their president, declaring themselves part of Russia. So Douglas Murray is denying that reality, prime reality, but also a reality according to international law. None of that matters. It's just Zelensky. He's so popular. In fact, he's more popular than Donald Trump. Isn't that interesting? So Ukraine has vibrant independent media that hold the government to account. Ukraine's vibrant independent media that hold the government to account are Global regime, they're propped up by the global regime. You can look at these media sources. It's unbelievable. This is Douglas Murray saying these things. Patrick Bet-David. I think Tucker Carlson's had him on. Joe Rogan. I think he goes on Fox News quite a bit as well. Douglas Murray, all based and red-pilled. Just did Jordan Peterson's little, let's all talk about how smart we are event. Let's all talk about how we're the real independent thinkers. I can't do enough of a Kermit the Frog voice to nail down Jordan Peterson properly, and that does make me sad. Let us continue. Truth number 7, Russia is not a friend of the U.S. It is a hostile, nuclear-armed state that resents American power and the world the U.S. has built. It has ever closer relations with China, Iran, and North Korea. In fact, all of its main friends are countries that are the biggest foes of America. Well, only in the minds of those representing the global regime, which, of course, Douglas Murray is doing. So when you look at these based and red-pilled conservatives, and they're making the arguments of the global regime, what does it matter that they identify as conservatives? The way I look at it, through good twin, evil twin, the global regime is the evil twin. The difference, the distinction to make is movement toward centralization and top-down control, or toward decentralization and more localized control, more fragmented control. And Douglas Murray is clearly declaring his allegiances, yet we think because he says based in red-pilled things about gender and immigration, the two issues that fake conservatives and regime globalists use to identify themselves as our allies, at some point we have to get past that. Give me a break with this. It's unbelievable. Truth number 8, Ukraine is a friend of the U.S. Well, they'd better be a friend. They're our proxy state. Of course, they're not our friend. They're a corrupt, quasi-state, proxy state with biological weapons labs, human trafficking. They're one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And they have a comedic actor leading their Nazi armies, canceling elections, and banning churches. Of course, I know those are all conspiracy theories. Truth number 9, Putin cannot be trusted. Putin has invaded multiple countries in violation of every international treaty. Well, if the areas he's invaded in Ukraine have voted in referenda to become part of Russia, didn't he liberate them? I'm not even trying to be pro-Putin right now, but can't we be honest about what's happening here? International law says that if people want to be governed by themselves or be governed by someone else, that's who they're governed by. Truth number 10, American aid to Ukraine is not being wasted. Nobody would argue that Ukraine is a country without corruption, but that does not mean its people and sovereignty should not be protected. Well, perhaps it's just their job to protect it and not our job to protect it. You can criticize Zelensky, but we should be under no illusions about who started this fire and who the true dictator or villain of this tragic tale is. So there we have a based and red-pilled conservative letting everyone know that actually Donald Trump is wrong about all of this. Douglas Murray, ally to conservatives everywhere, right? That's the guy. That's the guy. It's so sad when all our heroes, AKA all the people we listen to on television, because they say the really easy things that we like just so much. And it really is quite easy to make claims about wokeness and about immigration. How easy is it? How easy do we allow it to be? Because ultimately it's our choice, whether or not we're going to listen to these people, whether or not we're going to empower them, whether or not we're going to be swayed into believing that they are our allies. They align with us on these certain issues. They talk about them nonstop. They present themselves as the people at the vanguard of protecting American and quote unquote Western culture because they're the ones producing the 24/7 trans content. Ron DeSantis was the governor of Florida where wokeness goes to die. We're told that these people are fixing immigration. They want border bills. They need the funding. How come nothing ever gets fixed under them? And how come they always want someone other than Donald Trump to lead us? These people loved Ron DeSantis. They wanted to get rid of Donald Trump. And here is Ben Shapiro. In just a second, actually. So this week, the world is being infected by CPAC. I went to CPAC a couple of years ago to see what it was all about. Maybe meet some people who I had interacted with on the internet over the couple of years prior. Maybe network a little bit on behalf of Badlands and on behalf of this show. Patrick Gunnels and I went and checked it out. And it is an absolute shill fest where the biggest grifters and GOP scumbags in the world gather to make themselves more powerful. It's really, really grimy. And this year, I think, might be even worse. In 2023, it was people like Kurt Schlichter and John Cardillo walking around the bar, just hanging out there for hours and hours a day, trying to see and be seen. It reminded me of the old adage about how Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. I was in Hollywood in the middle of that culture and a prominent member of that culture for 18 and a half years. And so I recognized it immediately, of course. It's very plain to see what these people are doing, and it's very gross. And this year seems even worse as we have so many of these prominent Ron DeSantis, Republican establishment cuckolds trying to show off their allegiance to MAGA and how much they now like Donald Trump. And so with that said, now let's go to Ben Shapiro. And I just want to play a couple of minutes of his speech. And I'm sorry to do this to you, but I just want to know, I want you to know, I want us all to understand what we are witnessing here with the Republican establishment. Here we are.
Never felt more optimistic about the United States than I do right now.
Isn't that amazing? He's never felt more optimistic than right now. He tried to make certain that Donald Trump wouldn't be the nominee in the fake election. He tried to make it so no one would believe that Donald Trump was still popular, even in the Republican Party, much less in all of America. He tried to prevent this from happening. And try to imagine for a second if Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or J.D. Vance or any of the rest of them had become the Republican nominee in the fake campaign leading up to the fake election and were now being presented to all of America as the Republicans and as the new presidential administration. It would be them and probably the exact same fantasy team. And that's why we should always focus on the existence of the fantasy team and how just because Donald Trump has selected them in terms of the public narrative does not mean they are our friends any more than Ben Shapiro is our friend. Check this out.
And that is thanks to President Donald J. Trump. Now, one of the things that's sort of mysterious about President Trump is the fact that he isn't really an ideological conservative. Now, people like me, I grew up in the movement. I grew up reading Thomas Sowell and Frederick Hayek and reading Russell Kirk. I don't think President Trump has ever sat around reading those people. I don't think he sits around at night and browses Edmund Burke or anything. And so the question is, why is it that this man, who's not truly an ideological conservative, is the most successful conservative president of my lifetime, bar none? And so,
isn't that great? Ben Shapiro, Zionist, who supports globalism, he's the true conservative. Donald Trump is not the true conservative. He lets you know. But because he is now assumed the identity of a conservative, he's also the most successful one. What does that tell you about establishment conservatism, by the way?
It's a real question. And I think to understand that, the thing that we need to understand about President Trump is that more than anything else, and in this era, needed more than anything else, President Trump lives in the world of reality. President Trump has been slandered by the media as somebody who creates fictions of his own and sort of lives within those fictions and says a lot of words that don't always match up with the truth and all that kind of stuff. The reality is that President Trump, in his gut, lives in the real world, which is why President Trump wins so often, because if you are going to win, you have to acknowledge reality, because reality always wins. And this is what makes President Trump conservative. Conservatism lines up really, really well with reality. The reason that President Trump won the last election cycle is because the Democratic Party, the left, completely disconnected themselves from reality in every possible way. They ran screaming with their hair on fire, their blue hair on fire, away from reality.
Remember in 2022 when Ben Shapiro and his pals at the Daily Weimar and all of the other Ron DeSantis cuckolds told us that the reason the red wave did not materialize in the fake 2022 midterms was because of Donald Trump and the MAGA candidates and the MAGA base and our discussions of fake elections?
President Trump embraces reality with both arms. When it comes to the world of economics, for example, President Trump only cares about success. He cares about economic dynamism. He cares about American businesses being able to build and succeed. And he understands that in order for all those things to happen, you have to free American business from the shackle of regulation and government. You have to allow businesses to innovate. You have to allow people to rise and fall on their own merit. Meritocracy has to be valued more than, say, identity politics and DEI. President Trump knows that in his guts because he's a business person. President Trump has had to make payroll. Unlike literally every leader of the Democratic Party over the course of my lifetime, he's not a career politician, which means he's always been answerable to reality. And that means that when he unleashes another businessman, Elon Musk, inside the government and says, go in there with a meat axe and start taking out programs, that is what a businessman would do. If you came into a business as a
blah, blah, blah. Eventually, he gets to the point where because Donald Trump understands reality, he knows that the two-state solution in the Middle East isn't going to work. And I'm not sure if you were able to see it in that video, but the title of the video from the Detroit Free Press, they're hosting this, and I'm sure you can find it in plenty of places. Ben Shapiro at CPAC suggests Trump doesn't believe in two-state solution for Israel-Palestine. Isn't that amazing? How he takes the claim that Donald Trump understands reality. That is why he is the most successful conservative. He compares that to people with blue hair, which he's been doing now and making tons of money off normie conservatives for a decade. And then he angles that into actually Trump doesn't believe in a two-state solution for Palestine. I guess we'll find out. Most of the world already understands that Palestine is a state. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I'm just, that's the reality, Ben. There are major countries who do not believe that Israel is a state, and there are an overwhelming number of countries that believe Palestine is. Just saying. So let's continue to move forward here. Let's see how Donald Trump is actually doing. Before we get to everything else, I have to drop this in here, and we might as well do it now. This is an unbelievable clip from just today. He's been meeting, I believe, last night and today with the Governors Association or some gathering of the governors. Here he is addressing the governor of Maine.
CAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
Well, we are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
He goes hard. What can you say? That's the right way to handle that. Donald Trump controls whether or not that money's going to go there. And if they're not going to implement federal policy, why would the federal government be sending them money? That's the way the situation is now. I don't think federal money should be going to states, period. Okay. As I said on Badlands Daily this morning, maybe I'm a radical on these things, or perhaps a psycho on these things. I believe it should go all the way back. I believe that Donald Trump is trying to take it all the way back to the original Constitution, if not further. And that's where it should go. That is the intellectually and morally correct place for it to be. And that is why I always press so hard on these things, because as I said this morning, it's up to the people to be supplying the momentum and the motivation to keep pushing Trump forward. Imagine being the one who was out there, the one with the power who was facing all the resistance you could face in the world, and the people behind him, they believed it was only their role to applaud him whenever he was able to advance against all that thing, rather than to help push him and halt the enemy's momentum, to help him push the enemy back. That's what we should be doing, and we don't do it. We should be going further than Trump is going so that he can keep advancing. It's amazing to me continuously when people are like, why are you blackpilling about this? Why aren't you cheering for this hard enough? Well, because our role is not to cheer. If Donald Trump is the voice of the people, if he's the tribune of the people, if he is a servant of the people, then the people have to express their desires and where the people want to go. And if we're always steps behind Donald Trump rather than steps in front of Donald Trump, then we are failing Donald Trump. And I'm told that I'm not supporting him hard enough because I'm not cheering for Una Panuna Bunka. It's very crazy. And, you know. Una Panuna Bunka. Sorry, Una. I don't have anything against you. It's just, do better. Tam J 1116 in the chat. A Rumble rant, $100. Much appreciated. Thank you. My Rumble has decided to let me rant again. Wow. Thanks, Chris, for all your reasoning. See you in Vegas. I will see you in Vegas as well. And of course, she's referring to the Great American Restoration Tour that we will be doing with Badlands Media from March 6th through 9th. And to that rant, I say, wow. Wowie, wow, wow, wow. Oh, I love it. I said that Donald Trump earlier mentioned one James Carville. When I was a Democrat, used to really enjoy James Carville because I find that people with more unique personalities are just fun. I kind of appreciate their individualism. And Carville is a bit of a lunatic. Seems to be totally detached from reality. But hey, we can still have a nice time together, can't we? Here he is, I believe last night.
We went with our seventh-string quarterback, and we lost by 1.5 points, and we actually picked up a congressional seat. So if you're asking me, did I think that she was going to win, and she didn't win? Yes, all the polling showed it even. It turned out to be a 1.5 point race. And you lost seats, but if you have, and I'm telling the Democrats, just sit there, play possum, let them go, let them go, let them go. Poll numbers are declining. The collapse is already underway. Let's see when they put the Medicaid budget, when they put the $4.5 trillion of tax cuts to wealthy people. Just let the ball come to you. We don't need to be aggressive now.
So James Carville is disseminating the same narrative. Donald Trump is already falling apart. The poll numbers are collapsing. His own support base will eventually leave him. We don't need to do anything. We're going to be just fine. Here we are a month in. We only have 47 months to go. But hey, at some point within those 47 months, we'll pull off a bunch of terrorisms. Maybe we'll get an impeachment or two in there. All we need to do is take back the House and the Senate in the 2026 midterms, right? We can make Donald Trump look real bad by then, especially when we have all this help from the Uniparty right. He's going to go out there and try to make peace with our adversaries while abandoning all of our allies. Everybody's going to turn on Donald Trump. We're going to get him out of here. Then we're just going to keep right on going. Now, if you remember, for about a year leading up to the fake election of 2024, an election that Donald Trump did agree on Super Bowl Sunday was, of course, fake. I was saying what's going to happen is the regime is going to go with Donald Trump won this election. It's a fake election, but they can't put out the story that somehow first Biden and then Kamala won the election. So what they're going to have to do is frame a narrative around Donald Trump winning and having uniparty candidates down ballot in the House, the Senate, in state houses all around the country who can subvert Donald Trump's agenda. And all they need to do at that point is ride out Donald Trump's 4 years, lawfare, propaganda, whatever. And that's exactly what we see happening right now. Exactly what we see happening right now. Okay? If the system was not controlled in that way, it would be impossible to be right about something like that. But the system is controlled in that way. And it's not like it's some stroke of brilliance for me to figure that out. If everything is just them making up stories and a reaction on a different layer, while the reality goes on unnoticed down below because people don't have direct access to that reality. They have they have access to that reality prime layer only through the middleman of the mainstream media. So the middleman's job is to shape the public's understanding of reality prime, and that's exactly what they do. And they're already shaping the public understanding toward Donald Trump's approval and support collapsing. And I spent a bunch of time yesterday. When I don't do a stream, I basically just spend most of the day either trying to write, and if that fails, then I'm trying to figure out like what is being broadly communicated to us, who's communicating it, and what they're trying to convince us to believe. And a lot of the public communications from yesterday and from this week revolve around shaping the perception of Donald Trump as no longer this guy that's doing everything. Trump and Elon are losing this popularity. It's all collapsing. And sooner or later, everyone's going to abandon them. And we're going to be right back where we were in 2017, the second half of 2017, 2018, and so on. You remember what happened in the second half of 2017 after the Mueller investigation turned up nothing? We got Me Too. And that went for a while. And by the end of 2019, of course, we had the Ukraine impeachment hoax and then COVID, and then we were right into the fake election of 2020. If you don't think that's their strategy again, I would suggest that you are not paying attention. Let us continue. So I showed Trump's statement on Carville. This is where I was going to bring that up. But just again, the Democrats run by broken down losers like James Carville are going crazy and just don't know what to do. And so he's out there battling with these specific narratives for a specific reason, because these are their narrative attempts to sway and mold the public perception. Donald Trump has the bigger voice, especially with MAGA behind him. So he's going out and directing that voice at all their attacks and potential attacks, because under the we have it all theory, which I subscribe to, he knows where the attack points are going to be. He has, in my estimation, Zelensky and Netanyahu out there making people like Douglas Murray and Ben Shapiro totally burn themselves out in public. He's going to expose all these people as Uniparty right. And I would bet that he's going to do the same with the GOP establishment. And I was going to discuss this later, but maybe this is the perfect point at which to do it. This was from earlier this week. This is the USA Today on, what is this? This would be Wednesday. Well, Tuesday and then updated Wednesday. Will a DeeSantis run again? Poll favors governor's wife. Trump may favor this candidate. So they took a poll down in Florida saying that Casey, exclamation point, DeeSantis is going to run for governor. She's going to go in there and replace Ron. Both of these people are the worst. And the idea initially was that Matt Gaetz would be that guy. But now it seems like Byron Donalds, or it's possible that Trump is just throwing a wrench in the gears of GOP establishment politics. He went out yesterday on Truth Social and gave a preemptive endorsement to Byron Donalds. I am hearing that highly respected Congressman Byron Donalds is considering running for governor of Florida, a state that I love and won big in 2016, 2020, and 2024. I know Byron well, have seen him tested at the highest and most difficult levels, and he's a total winner. Byron has a great wife, Erica, and 3 beautiful sons. They are very proud of him. As governor, Byron would have a big voice and would work closely with me to advance our America First agenda. He will fight tirelessly to secure our border, stop migrant crime, strengthen our military, protect our vets, restore our economic power, advance American energy dominance, and defend our always under siege Second Amendment. Byron Donalds would be a truly great and powerful governor for Florida, and should he decide to run, will have my complete and total endorsement. Run, Byron, run. Isn't that interesting that he's making a preemptive endorsement of Byron Donalds for Florida governor just a couple days after the mainstream media, on behalf of the Uniparty right establishment, pushes Casey DeeSantis out there for the next governor of Florida to take over for Ron? I thought it was all kayfabe. What happened to that? The amount of heat I took, by the way, from people on quote unquote our side, incredible. Just lovers of Ron. Why were they lovers of Ron? Well, Ron was on TV all the time being super based and super red-pilled about COVID while locking down his state. There was a script written, has taken that script off course because he is undeniable in the media environment and the public will listen to him. Whatever was scripted for the Great Reset had 2 sides pushing it forward, okay? That's the thing that people really do have to understand. We're going to come to Elon Musk for a second. So maybe I'll just take a second with this so that people can really get my thinking on this, because people get upset, I think, at the way that I perceive this situation, which is different than many of my peers. And that's fine. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong, or I wouldn't be saying it, but maybe I am. I understand that I might be. Let's say it like that. Okay. So the Build Back Better agenda, the World Economic Forum agenda, a lot of people understand that. They understand the mass migration. They understand the wokeness. They understand the social aspects of it. And they understand some of the economic aspects of it as well. The transnational corporations, the centralization of things, the global free trade, quote unquote. An agenda like that cannot be implemented by just one side, particularly knowing that the people will reject the agenda. And of course, they knew that people would reject the agenda. And they knew that people would reject the agenda in certain ways, and that if they had allies reject the agenda on a very superficial level throughout the entire time while the regime is supporting that agenda, well, then the people might side with those media figures, allies of the agenda, of the World Economic Forum, of the global regime, believing that those are the people in positions of power who can help us collectively reject that Build Back Better agenda. And I'm sorry if my dog is interfering right now. He's going crazy. I think maybe there's a delivery here or something. Someone just asked if I have the Maggie in the chat just asked if I had the video of Ron. And of course I have videos of Ron. I have a bunch of videos of Ron. And while my dog's continuing to go nuts, let's just look over some of Ron's greatest hits. That was Ron getting a little makeup during one of the fake Republican debates. Here's Ron as well. Looks like he might have smelled something. Here's Ron with a nice hearty laugh. I used to torture Ron supporters with these on X, formerly Twitter. And then, of course, the one that I use at the end.
I will not let you down.
What a goofball. What a meatball that guy is. Everybody thought that was the savior of the Republican Party. Gosh. I don't know what to say. Okay. My point is, as far as the Great Reset is concerned, if you are the global regime, and you control the media, and you control the currency and the finance and the economics, and you control the resources and trade routes and ultimately the military. If you have that much control over everything, then you are able to script things as you would like to see them evolve in society. And of course, that's what they did. Klaus Schwab published a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. And he published it. And anyone could read it throughout the pandemic. There was all sorts of talk of pandemics in the years leading up to that. The same intellectual dark web people always having on Yuval Noah Harari, people like Douglas Murray in that circle. And they would tell us how pandemics were a threat and that Donald Trump presented a threat to our institutions and our institutions needed to be better. And this part of society or that part of society was failing and needed to be fixed. And there were all sorts of books. The entire sphere of public intellectuals was committed to supporting this or that pillar of the Great Reset agenda, which spanned a whole of society approach. So if you have that much control and you have that much money and you know that there is a controlled opposition already set up in America, you have the Uniparty in place, you have all of your controlled politicians, and then you have a media that supports that same controlled opposition dynamic that the Uniparty represents. You've got your MSNBC, you've got your Fox in the middle, you've got your CNN, you've got your podcast bros, the Obama podcast bros. What were they called? Pod Saves America. And then you've got the Daily Weimar on the other side. And you set things up like that. So for everything you have on the Uniparty left, you got their mirror on the Uniparty right, and you just let them battle. And because our side hates the Uniparty left, we side with the people battling them. And because their side hates the Uniparty right, they have all their characters that they side with. And so we get both parts of the controlled opposition dynamic. But underlying that is the reality prime, and somewhere in there, something closer to the truth, but that is avoided. In the ultimate truth is avoided. The narrative truth projected by the regime is supported by both Uniparty right and Uniparty left. So the Daily Weimar and Ben Shapiro support the idea that COVID is real. It's a very deadly pandemic, just as much as Rachel Maddow does on the other side. And of course, that's his mirror counterpart. Okay. So they both agree COVID is a very real, very deadly pandemic. Now, what Donald Trump does in that situation is understands, okay, 80 or 90% of the country at least is going to believe that COVID is real and a very deadly pandemic. So I can either say, no, it's not, and deal with the consequences of that, or I can accept it as real and then steer people away when I can. And I think that that was the dynamic that was playing out throughout 2020. And I think that we can see that same dynamic playing out on a range of other issues over the last 10 years. All right. But the point is, both sides of the controlled opposition dynamic are supporting the reality of COVID. And both sides, a few months later, supported the COVID vaccines as being very safe and very effective. You remember Ben Shapiro, just get the vaccine, dopes. How does something like that happen? Oh, yeah, his wife's a doctor. You saw both sides of the controlled opposition dynamic supporting the idea that Joe Biden really received 81 million real lawful American votes. You saw both sides of the controlled opposition dynamic supporting the idea that Vladimir Putin really did stage a very brutal invasion in Ukraine, and we had to protect their sovereign borders. Their democracy was our democracy. And again, we can see this again and over on virtually every issue. There's a controlled opposition dynamic set up that mirrors the Uniparty structure. Both sides agree to the truth of the underlying reality. And if you agree to the truth of the underlying reality, then no matter which brand of response you choose, you are still doing the work of the Uniparty, of the global regime, in your acceptance of the controlled opposition dynamic, which is why it's necessary to reject both sides of the controlled opposition dynamic, even when that one side seems like they're our friends. Okay? And that is what Donald Trump ultimately exists to do, in my estimation. Ben Shapiro, for instance, is supporting the global regime's, the underlying truth, the truth of the underlying reality, I should say, that the global regime is building and upon which they can advance the Great Reset agenda. And that agenda is still advancing because the controlled opposition dynamic remains in place and the Uniparty apparatus remains in place. We are too afraid to break the Uniparty right side because we think these people are our allies and we're worried about winning a fake election in 2026. That's a very dangerous place to be because the thing is still advancing. Doesn't mean we can't take it off course, but it does mean that if we continue to support the GOP establishment, it's the same as supporting the Democrat establishment because they are advancing the Great Reset agenda. And that's what has to be avoided at all costs. Maybe it's too late. I don't know. Maybe it is. I tend not to think so because I think it's ultimately up to the people, or they wouldn't expend so much time and energy propagandizing us and censoring us, because it is through our collective belief that we help them create the reality they need to complete the mission. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to pause for a second and then we can kind of reset here. Someone in the chat saying they're trying to kick off COVID 2.0. Yes, they are. And if I'm able to get through all my stuff today, I have a whole bunch of COVID stuff. Gosh. Maybe if we go 5 hours. Okay. Okay, so we talked about Elon and his interview with Donald Trump on Hannity the other night. Yesterday, he went for a live interview to CPAC, and Elon went in his clown costume. He started the whole thing by saying, "I am become meme," I guess co-opting the phrase that Oppenheimer also co-opted, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds." Javier Milei brought him a chainsaw, and Elon took it as though he was a rock star with a guitar and ran around the stage with it and threw it up in the air and jumped around like he was doing his whole routine at the Butler rally, the second Butler rally, which may have been scheduled before assassination event number 1, and it wasn't there to show off Donald Trump. It was probably there to show off the non-successor. Who knows? There are just other ways these things could have gone. Then he appeared for the Turning Point inauguration celebration and did the weird thing that people took as a Nazi salute. And here he is in sunglasses, a big gold chain, a T-shirt, his Gothic Make America Great hat, I think is how he referred to it. But let's hear a little bit of what he has to say, because he's clearly a key and important voice at this point, and he had some interesting comments. I am forgetting this man's name who's interviewing him. He's one of the guys over at Newsmax, and I've tended over the years to like him, but he was an extreme normie in this interview. And I was like, oh, man, does this guy just really believe all this stuff? Well, let's continue.
Yeah. I want to ask you, one of the biggest questions I have for you is you've been, politically, you weren't really on one side or the other for a long time. You're a businessman. A lot of people, they stay away from it. Now you're on a side, and you've chosen a side. You're sitting here in a MAGA hat. What's it, how did that happen? What was the moment?
It's dark Gothic MAGA.
That's a good one. What was there a specific moment? Was there a moment that it all changed?
Yeah, when I realized I was a fool. But no, I was, I guess, yeah, I mean, I'd say I was politically neutral for quite a while. Leaning a little Democrat.
How do you go from that to this?
Yeah, no,
How does that happen?
Well,
did they go crazy?
Yeah, they did go crazy.
Yeah, they went crazy.
No, I mean, that whole cancel culture and it's trying to stop freedom of speech. And
he goes on. The key there, I thought it was so funny. Like, how did this conversion happen? When did it happen? When I stopped, when I realized I was a fool. Gotta love that. He mentioned cancel culture there. It's funny. I was on Substack last night. I don't often spend a lot of time on the Substack app, just kind of looking around and seeing what people are saying, but it would suggest various people's Substacks, and occasionally I'll look at someone's page and just see what they're saying. And I saw a DeeSantis named Pablo Gonzalez or something, Pedro, I think, and switched over to his page, and he was talking about how cool it is that he can talk on Substack. It's not like Twitter or Blue Sky where people are so combative. And apparently he's spending quite a bit of time on Blue Sky, which is interesting for a DeeSantis because that is just a liberal cesspool. It's awful over there. Very retarded. I got banned from that platform in 2 days. And go to imyourmoderator.substack.com, use the little search feature on my Substack and type in Blue Sky, one word, and read. I think it's pretty funny. I captured a bunch of the interactions that led to my banning over there. It really was wonderful. But there was someone in the left of center, the Uniparty left mainstream, talking and interacting with MSNBC characters and whatnot, who was suggesting that maybe it's becoming a little passé to still be talking about cancel culture. And I was like, what? People are still talking about cancel culture? That was like 5 years ago. These people are trapped in a totally deranged informational past. And I was pretty shocked by it, to tell you the truth. I mean, whatever. It's not like I'm feeling bad for them or anything, but wow, really? Cancel culture? That's your thing? I think that talking about wokeness has been totally passé for 3 years. And that's still the beginning, like the first story on every episode of Matt Walsh's 24/7 trans content, Dan Bongino, and all the rest.
How
do you go from that to this?
Yeah, no. Well,
did they go crazy?
Yeah, they did go crazy.
Yeah, they went crazy.
No, I mean, that whole cancel culture and it's trying to stop freedom of speech. And
God damn it, that was the wrong clip. How did that one get in there? I see what's happening. I just learned something new about YouTube's timestamp feature. If you're using the timestamp thing, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think if you're using the timestamp thing and you are trying to hit various timestamps on the same video, it's going to override your timestamp. Whatever. Let's try this. Here we go. This should work.
Even good music.
Yeah. There's a lot of music lately. It's not good music either. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that watching what you're doing with Doge is just people love it. I mean, I've always looked at the government and I've always looked at the government. I've seen this big machine and you just know that they waste because they don't care. There's more money coming. They don't care.
Yeah.
You're cutting all this out. Everybody in this country knows that the government is full of waste, fraud, and abuse. And you're doing the work, and the Americans love it. Watching their reaction politically to this, I can't believe how bad they are at responding to this. I don't know how you're going to sit there and scream and complain because they're cutting waste out of the government and try to win another election. How do you try to win on that?
Well, at this point, I'm not sure how much of the left is even real.
Yeah.
You know,
how much was propped up by our money? You know.
Yeah. Like literally, you see like these sort of fake rallies where there's like hardly any people, and the media will like frame it and like get all 6 people in the frame, but there's like nobody else is there. Like just it doesn't have popular support. But then you learn that like there's hundreds of billions of dollars going to these so-called NGOs.
Yeah.
So let's pause it right there for just a second. So Elon Musk is saying you wonder if the left is even real. He's saying it doesn't have popular support. I would bet that Elon is in the upper 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1% to a whole bunch of, so you draw a little dot on a piece of paper and then you draw a bunch of zeros and then finally a 1. That's where Elon Musk is in terms of his knowledge about what the public believes. He has access to all the information on Twitter forever. So he knows exactly what public sentiment is. He could just run a little program or have his little band of geniuses run a program and say, and find out, hey, what are things like for the Democrats? Are there more of them than the Republicans? Do Americans believe this or that? He can know. Like, even if it takes, I would bet he could know in a moment's notice, but if not a moment's notice, in 24 hours, he could certainly know. And he's saying, I don't think it's even real. Why is that? Because it's not. It's supported by this media charade.
And it's your tax dollars that are funding things that are fundamentally anti-American.
And they're propping up their narrative.
Yes.
A lot of that government money has been propping up a left that I don't think is as strong as they made it seem.
In fact, a massive amount of your tax dollars is going to legacy media companies.
Yes.
Directly from the government.
The government wants to take over media.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. That's why we have X.
Yeah, and that's
why you spent $44 billion. I mean, that's a lot of money.
I mean,
more than it was probably worth. But there was a message.
Freedom is priceless.
Priceless. Yeah. Probably one of the most important investments this country's ever seen. If you got to protect the First Amendment, it's not much more important than that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of criticism, and people said, "Well, that proves he's a huge idiot." From he bought it for whatever $44 billion, and now it's worth like 8 cents. And
it's not worth 8 cents.
But there's that. But it was essentially to buy freedom of expression,
Once that's gone, it's all over.
Yeah.
It's all over.
Yeah,
the tyranny is really quick after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the sort of federal money going to media companies is what helps explain why the legacy media all says the same thing at the same time.
Yeah,
like isn't it like it's like weird? Like you put them up where it's like like when
they're mouthpieces for
the state.
For the state.
Yes,
and that's what we've come to know.
Yeah,
it's scary.
And I like that meme where they because they're always saying like threat to our democracy, but if you just replace democracy with bureaucracy, it makes a lot of sense.
So he talks about the legacy media being sponsored by the state. They are the mouthpiece of the state. And the legacy media is what creates the illusion that there actually is some opposition to this American populist movement. And there is an opposition out there to the extent that people believe the legacy media and understand the results of our elections as a representation of what the American people actually think, because people don't want to go out and publicly violate consensus, because they know that if they do that, there is a series of punishments that might be applied to them. And if they go along with it, there is a series of incentives they can participate in. And of course, that's the incentive and punishment structure I talk about in the party of false decorum. That is exactly what that is. And without that, there's no way that people would believe most of this garbage, because it is garbage. It's just fanciful nonsense made up out of nothing to convince people to participate in that incentive and punishment structure. And by doing so, through their actions, create the reality that will help them implement the agenda as we move forward. That's big picture. What's happening? Let's continue with Elon. This is an interesting comment because, and actually, let me just play the comment and then we'll follow up.
They're mouthpieces for
the state.
For the state.
Ah,
yeah.
gosh.
And that's
I did it again. It's doing that timestamp thing. I think at least I've got it figured out now, which will probably save me some amount of time in bothering to get the timestamps in the first place.
And then they say, "Oh, $1 million doesn't matter." I'm like, I think it matters a lot to people, you know. So what are you talking about?
I'd like to have it. Let me ask you a question. I know the president fairly well. Watched him survive 2 assassination attempts. Had the first one not happened, the second one would have gotten him. It was very, because without those extra guys, they would have never seen that gun poking through the fence at the golf course. I saw the crew that you had.
What a clown show, by the way. Just making it up. Oh, this is what would have definitely happened. Assassination event number 1 happened. We still don't know, Elon's going to say, anything about the shooter from assassination event number 1. But, oh, man, his security was ramped up after that. And if it wasn't ramped up, we would have never even caught the guy who supposedly did assassination event number 2. Ridiculous.
Mind-blowing that this has happened. I mean, it just... And what? By the way, why do we still know nothing about that guy in Butler? What's going on?
Yeah, why don't we know anything about that guy?
But
he's
Kash is going to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, there you go.
By the way.
Well, we'll see about that. Let's hope he does.
Yeah. Woo.
Maybe that's a taunt to the conservative establishment and the people who are actually behind assassination event number 1.
Confirmed just a couple hours ago, but I saw that the security detail that you had come in is enormous.
Well, it's not that enormous. Maybe it should be bigger. I don't know.
I think you could probably afford it. But I mean, how concerned are you about your safety dealing? I mean, you are a wanted man. Are you nervous?
So, look, I'm open to ideas for improving security. I have to tell you, I don't actually have a death wish. I think. But it's not that easy. I mean, but I have I've had even people like President Bukele from El Salvador who managed to put in prison 100,000 murderous thugs, and he was like, he called me, he's like, "I'm worried about your security." I'm like, "You're worried about my security?" I'm like, "What?"
Okay, so let's go to CNN today because there's an interesting wrinkle on that comment. Or sorry, CNN from last night. Elon Musk's private security detail gets deputized by U.S. Marshals Service. It was not immediately clear how many members of Musk's security team were made special deputies. Now that members have been deputized, they have more rights and could be authorized to carry weapons on federal grounds. It also means that if something went awry with the detail, the Marshals Service could be held legally liable. One law enforcement source said. Oh, yes, I'm sure that will become such a concern. Some people close to Trump's White House have been taken aback by the scale of security that has surrounded Musk since he became a regular presence in Trump's orbit last year. And so it kind of sounds like they're talking up a potential attempt on Elon Musk's life. Are we going to hear something about that? Think about how long we heard stories about how they were going to attempt to assassinate Donald Trump. We heard that from Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones. Musk has become increasingly concerned with his security since Trump took office a month ago and has told those around him that the level of death threats against him has increased, according to a person with direct knowledge of his comments. Give me a break. They mentioned his comments from on stage that we just saw. The Marshals Service has the power to deputize a wide swath of people at their own discretion, including Justice Department employees, law enforcement officials, and employees of private security companies. The deputization, which typically comes from the Deputy Attorney General, lasts for 1 year, according to a Justice Department manual. The Marshals Service has deputized security details before, including that of Dr. Anthony Fauci. The Marshals deputized officers from the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services to serve as Fauci's security because of an interest in threats to his personal safety. So, is that what the Marshals were doing around Anthony Fauci? Is that what the Marshals were doing around Nancy Pelosi on the days surrounding? Was it the very violent insurrection, or was it Biden's fake inauguration that they were all around Pelosi? Let me skip forward. I'm trying to find my proper timestamps as we continue with just a couple more quick clips of Elon Musk.
Asking the president for trying a different method to a war that they haven't been able to end for 3.5 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
They're saying Trump's blaming Zelensky for the invasion. How do you process all of the negativity toward him for trying to end this war?
Well, first of all, I think we should have empathy for the people dying at the front lines. That's the most important thing. And people have been dying, it's like, how many more years is this supposed to go on?
Yeah.
And imagine if that was your son, your father. What are they dying for?
Yeah.
What exactly are they dying for? That line the line of engagement has barely moved for 2 years.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people dead in trenches for what? And I'll tell you what for what. It's like for the biggest graft machine that I've ever seen in my life. That's for what. It's unreal. Like the amount of money that is being taken in graft and bribery is disgusting. And so what's actually happening is that those people, those poor guys are getting sent into a meat grinder for money. That's what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Now, I find that statement very interesting. And if you've listened to this show for a long time, you'll know why. I think that that's what war is. I'm reading a book right now called 1917. I always mix up what the subtitle of it is. Sorry. Hold for processing for just a moment. I don't want to mistake it. So it's a history book written by a man named Warren Hasty Carroll, who has the writing talents of a great novelist. The book's called 1917 Red Banners, White Mantle. Now, I cannot tell you that he's giving the accurate picture of history. I think he has his viewpoint. I would guess that he's a Catholic. He actually wrote a very long series called The History of Christendom that I probably want to try to take on at some point because he is such a fantastic writer that I think learning about that history from any viewpoint from a writer that talented would be just a pleasure. But one thing that I keep in mind while I read that book is the impression of war that I have come to have over the last few years, which is, and it is very much aligned with something that many of us heard throughout our upbringing, I'm guessing, that the global bankers fund both sides of the war. And I always thought that's so strange. Why would they do that? One country's fighting the other country, trying to destroy the other country. Why would they fund both sides? That would seem like just, a losing sort of investment. Then I realized that they actually, through the good twin, evil twin thing, it's not one country fighting the other country on behalf of the global regime. It's the global regime's leaders in one country sending all their brave and patriotic men who would resist the implementation of the agenda of the global regime to foreign shores to be slaughtered by the good and brave and patriotic men who are resisting the global regime's agenda in another country. And they'll just slaughter each other so that at the end, there's no men, good, strong, brave, patriotic men in either country who could be there to resist the global regime's agenda. And whoever survives has just a lifetime of trauma and nightmares, while back at home, all the global communists who went to college, and I'm not saying everybody, I went to college, okay? It's not all college graduates, hashtag, who end up getting all the women and get to procreate. And how many generations does it take for the public at large to wake up to this dynamic and then become themselves again brave, patriotic people who are going to stand up and object to the global regime's agenda? And in the meantime, you get 2 or 3 or 4 generations of constant implementation of that agenda while people are consistently indoctrinated to the global regime's ideology. So when you talk about men being sent into a meat grinder for money, which Elon just said, the number one recipient of U.S. Defense Department contracts just said that. As far as I'm concerned, that's exactly the same belief that I have expressed. Maybe he's just kind of saying it flippantly. I kind of doubt it. Let's just hear one more quick thing from Elon before we move on.
You sleep? What's... paint us a picture of inside of the mind of a genius. Like, how do you do all this? Can you answer that question? It's not an easy question. Yeah.
I mean, my mind is a storm.
Yeah.
So, it's a storm.
Paint us a picture of the inside of the mind of a genius. My mind is a storm. And by the way, I just have to say this. I know it's crazy. It's all good. Elon's mannerisms and body movements make me think he's being played by Milo Yiannopoulos. I wonder if I can get, I wonder if I can find a good, quick video of Milo. Post-gay Milo. Man, you got to have one in the last few years. There's too many. All the videos coming up are gay Milo. I want straight Milo. One of the videos that came up is Douglas Murray's talk. Oh gosh, the headline, Douglas Murray's talk that left 4,000 people speechless at ARC. Actually, let's steer off course for a second here. So Jordan Peterson started a based and red-pilled intellectual dark web version of the World Economic Forum called ARC. Here, let's just listen to 2 minutes of Douglas Murray while I attempt to find Milo Yiannopoulos.
And you can still create more and more illiterates. So I just wanted to mention briefly the 2 things I think that can be looked at. The first is, of course, innovation. Again, for those of us in Europe and in Britain, there's an enormous amount to learn rather than to scorn the American experience. There are reasons why so many of the unicorn startups are from America, why disproportionately they're still from America. There must be something that they're doing right. In this country, we still have a situation where 1 in 5 of the working age population simply do not work. And we, the rest of the taxpayers, subsidize those people not to work. And this seems to me to be a great national scandal, but still something which our governments don't care to address.
Whatever. Let's look at Milo. I think this is going to work out well here.
Let me tell you about these text messages. It just look. Let me read this text message. Look. When you have a guest like Milo Yiannopoulos, somebody who has been, look, I mean, I have been. This is, by the way, my first time allowed on the Blaze ever.
Congratulations.
No, I'm not congratulating anybody. In 10 years of being insulted by Glenn Beck, who has the IQ of
Glenn Beck's smart. He's a genius.
He has the IQ of a lump. The IQ of a lump of cheese.
That's not. That's
look. In 10 years of being insulted by Glenn Beck, I've never been allowed on his network to defend myself. And look.
I mean, they have very similar mannerisms, and the it's not a stutter, but whatever you might want to call that. Gosh, it's really Really is interesting. All right, let us continue. We're going to move on, I believe, now from Elon. My mind is a storm. All right, let's take it back to some White House business. Let me just, while we're paused, let me just take a look at the chat. Hold on here. People are asking me if I don't think Elon is the real Elon. I didn't say that. I'm just making a joke and showing you quite clearly that Milo Yiannopoulos and Elon Musk seem to have the exact same mannerisms and also wear the same clothes. It's hilarious. We live in interesting times. Okay. So let's go to the White House press room from yesterday. We don't even have to listen to the response here, but just a little bit of fun with CNN's Caitlin Collins, who at some point is this lady just so bad at her job that she's good for us? Totally possible. Or is she just a plant? And man, it's been, I don't know, many years at this point. She used to be, I think at the Daily Caller. But she used to be a base and red pill conservative. So here we are, just quick.
Argue against peace.
Okay, so you do share that assessment. And can I follow up? In 2017,
go ahead,
then
Jordan.
Trump.
Go ahead,
Can I just
Jordan.
really
You just had two questions, Caitlin. Jordan, go ahead.
I have an important follow-up.
Jordan, go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
Mr. Hassett, you were.
Caitlin Collins gets dunked on a lot lately. And at some point, it's just going to be a thing, dunking on Caitlin Collins. Let me see if I can make this timestamp actually work. No guarantees. Wonderful. I think this will work. All right. Where are we? Hold for processing. Now, this is very good. I think many of you probably have seen this already. Stephen Miller just knocks it out of the park.
Stephen Miller about Doge. So you spoke about Doge. You said roughly $50 billion is set to be cut in a year of waste, fraud, and abuse by unelected bureaucrats. We're hearing this ironic narrative from the president's critics and the left-wing media that Elon Musk is an unelected bureaucrat and he's doing all this terrible stuff. Isn't one of Doge's objectives to get rid of the federal bureaucracy, the deep state? And also, who was running the White House when Joe Biden was in office? Because I don't know a single person who believes it was Joe Biden.
Yes. You're tempting me to say some very harsh things about some of our media friends. Yes, it is true that many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected at the district or state level, just one man. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause known as the vesting clause. And it says the executive power shall be vested in a president, singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenure civil servants who believe they answer to no one, who believe they can do whatever they want without consequence, who believe they can set their own agenda no matter what Americans vote for. So Americans vote for radical FBI reform, and FBI agents say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote for radical reform on our energy policies, but EPA bureaucrats say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote to end DEI, racist DEI policies, and lawyers in the Department of Justice say they don't want to change. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm looking at the clock. We've almost had an hour of time.
That's a lot of the stuff we've been talking about on this show for the last few weeks. And let's continue on with that because Donald Trump has not slowed down at all. Before we get to the latest on that level, though, I want to stick with Stephen Miller for just another second. We discussed this briefly on Badlands Daily this morning. This is from the Washington Examiner. September 23rd, 2021, Sean Spicer and Russ Vought sue Biden over illegal firing from Naval Academy Board. Two former top aides to former President Donald Trump have sued President Joe Biden over his illegal power play to fire them from key military academy boards. Former Trump spokesman Sean Spicer and budget chief Russ Vought said in court documents, shared with secrets, this is Paul Bedard's thing, that the White House does not have any authority over the boards, arguing the law states that members leave only when their 3-year term is up, they resign, or they die. The suit was filed on behalf of the duo by America First Legal, which said in its statement, this illegal partisan power grab is just another example of the Biden administration breaking long-standing bipartisan norms and traditions. And so Stephen Miller was at America First Legal suing on their behalf. Let's cut to the results here. This is The Hill. Judge tosses out Sean Spicer lawsuit over Naval Academy Board dismissal. This is July 12th of 2022. In a 6-page order filed Monday, U.S. District Judge Dabney L. Friedrich found that federal law did not insulate Spicer from removal from his position. Therefore, the plaintiffs failed to state a claim for relief. The back and forth began in September when Biden sought the resignations of Spicer and Vought. Former President Trump appointed them to the board in the final weeks of his presidency as he looked to stock advisory boards with loyalists. Spicer's term was slated to end in December and Vought's at the end of next year. Friedrich denied a motion for a preliminary injunction that would have forced Biden to reinstate Spicer and Vought in December, rejecting their arguments that their removal would silence dissenting views and that their position carried 3-year terms. Monday's opinion largely maintained that view, finding the plaintiffs hadn't identified specific protections for removal. Okay. So let's jump to the present day. This is Glenn Beck from, so none of my timestamps work anywhere, period, I suppose. This is Sean Spicer, and on the Glenn Beck show, Glenn Beck, who, according to Milo Yiannopoulos, has the IQ of a lump of cheese. I cannot confirm or deny. It's certainly possible. Sean Spicer is going to tell the story behind the story.
I'll take you back one step further.
Okay.
So I stepped down as White House press secretary, and the president has always been kind and offered to appoint me to a couple boards. He appointed me to 2 of them. One of them was the White House Commission on Fellows. I was a commissioner there. And then he also was kind enough to make me one of his appointees to the board of visitors of the U.S. Naval Academy. So I was sworn into office. Joe Biden comes into office. And so on January 20th, myself and all of the White House commissioners at that fellowship committee resigned because it's a White House commission and the new president has a right to have people for White House commissions. Sure. Fair enough. Well, September 1st, I get an email of 2021 and it says, "Dear Mr. Spicer, thank you for your service to the U.S. Naval Academy Board of Visitors. By 6 o'clock tonight, please submit your resignation or you will be fired." And I thought, whoa, what? Now, just for context, remember, Glenn, September 1st, my term ended November 1st, 60 days later. I was like, you couldn't wait 60 days just to have it for free? So I was like, I'd been sworn into office. My term was, ended that time, and I obviously wasn't going to get reappointed. Biden had his right to appoint his people. Great. So it turns out that he fired everybody myself from the Naval Academy Board, Russ Vogt from the Naval Academy Board, and then a guy named H.R. McMaster from the West Point Board, who, by the way, H.R. McMaster, you remember, was a national security advisor to Trump, 3-star Army general, who was a graduate of West Point, a distinguished professor at West Point, and the Friday after that Tuesday email was going to be honored at West Point as a distinguished alumni in their awards ceremony. So anyway, he fires us September 1st. I don't resign. I said, I'm not resigning. You can fire me if you want. And then Stephen Miller in America First came to me and said, we have an idea. I said, okay, what's the idea? He goes, we want to sue Biden. Now, Glenn, I'm not a lawyer. But I said, guys, I watch a lot of Law and Order. But how in God's earth, if we sue the guy in September, I mean, my term ends November 1st. We're never going to get back on the board. And they said, no. Let's go to court and make Joe Biden argue that he has the absolute authority to fire anybody. And because we're not going to win the case. They'll rule against us. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. So the only people, but here's the kicker, the only people who were willing to put their name on that lawsuit are myself and Russ Vogt. Of all of the other people that were so honored that President Trump had appointed them. And they went to everyone and said, hey, will you sign on to this? And they said, thanks, we're busy. Russ Vogt. So the case became Spicer et al. V. Biden. It goes up to the court. The court says the president has the absolute authority to that. We appeal the decision. It goes to the appeals level. And the court, again, reaffirms the decision that Joe Biden and the president of the United States have the absolute authority to fire anyone. And the media started calling Glenn and they go, you lost the case. And I said at the time, did I? so Donald Trump gets elected, and this is where it gets really fun. You'll love this.
Now you know the rest of the story. Here it comes.
Yes, thank you, Paul Harvey. So the New York, I write this story in this op-ed for the New York Post saying, hey, guess what? Spicer v. Biden has given President Trump the authority to fire anyone he wants. I hope that President Trump executes it. And the White House is tweeting, sending me messages back. Guess who we just fired? Guess who we just fired? And I'm living in this glory. Well, I write this piece for the New York Post explaining, hey, here's what we did. Here's the legal basis. All of these people who are about to get fired by Trump should thank President Biden for this. Now, here's where it gets fun. The New York Post in the editing process says to me, okay, well, was it just the service academies? And I said, no, they had the right to fire anyone. And they said, well, give us some examples. And so I got the list of boards and commissions that the president can appoint to. There's like a couple hundred too. And I start reading one of the editors. I said, well, they could fire, there's the Battlefield Commission, there's the Truman Scholarship, there's the Kennedy Center. She goes, oh, put that in the op-ed. Put that. People will identify with that. And then we went.
And the story goes on for like another 10 minutes, and they talk about, the firings of the entire board there at the Kennedy Center. But obviously the key there is the foresight by Trump and Stephen Miller to select some of these people who Trump had appointed at the end of his term to these various boards, and then get the regime's system to destroy itself. That's hysterical, first of all. It also is suggestive of devolution, and it also suggests a particular dynamic and framing that we can see at play again and again and again. Trump put people in place who would be rejected by the regime. Upon the regime rejecting them, they took it to court, made the court affirm the regime's position, which gives precedent. And now that's standing precedent that says, yep, the president can fire all these people. That's exactly what Trump did. And there's nothing they can do about it now. And we've seen this thing play out a number of times now. It is worth observing and understanding. And it's not the sort of thing that just happens randomly. Gotta love that. Let's take just a second. I'm going to do one of these Rumble ads. Let's do this stickerpack.com. Should be jumping up there anytime now. Are you ready to show your support in style? Sticker Mule has a fantastic offer just for you. For a limited time, you can grab free Trump stickers. Yes, you heard that right, free. Whether you want to decorate your laptop, car, or office space, these high-quality, durable stickers are perfect for making a statement. Just imagine how great they'll look. They're super easy to apply. Here's how it works. Head on over to stickerpack.com, sign up, and claim your free stickers. Watch the fun unfold. Don't miss out on this exclusive offer. Stock is limited, so act fast, spread the word, and let your voice be heard with Sticker Mule's awesome stickers. Once again, visit stickerpack.com today and grab your free Trump stickers before they're gone. You can see the QR code there on the left side of your screen. And eventually, maybe this weekend I'll do it, but eventually I am going to try to get some very reasonable stickers up on Sticker Mule so that orange shop button on Rumble actually goes somewhere. One of these days. I was trying to design some stuff yesterday. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes not so well. I am not necessarily a talented designer, but getting my ideas executed with AI has had some success. I would prioritize this particular design right here, the opt-out thing. That is up right now, actually, on cancelcouture.com. So you can go find that. And the podcast logo merch is now up over there. The Reality Prime merch is up over there. See you in the gulags. Okay, Kami. And, of course, You Sound Vaccinated are all up over there. Cancelcouture.com. Polymath, Anon, $5. Friday $5 rant challenge. Who wants to support Chris? Oh, well, thank you. See, now you're making me read my own call for action. I didn't plan to do that, but hey. Thank you, Polymath Anon. Let us continue. So we just had the confirmation of Trump's ability as president to take the axe to parts of the executive branch and American government institutions. There's only 3 branches. There's the legislative branch and the judicial branch, and Trump can't change what they're doing. But everything else, that's Trump's business. And so he can actually get rid of people. And here is another example of that. This is one I will enjoy, and any listener of my podcast for any duration understands the background here. U.S. declares administrative law judge removal rules unconstitutional. We had the executive order from Donald Trump the other day that, among other things regarding the independent agencies, declared that interpretations of law for the executive branch would be made by the president and the attorney general alone. The U.S. Justice Department has determined that multiple layers of removal restrictions shielding administrative law judges are unconstitutional and will no longer defend them in court, top officials said on Thursday. Chad Mizell, the department's chief of staff, called the administrative law judges who preside over administrative disputes in the federal government unelected and constitutionally unaccountable. Correct. In a letter to U.S. Senator Charles Grassley that Mizell posted on X, acting Solicitor General, Sarah Harris, wrote that the Justice Department would no longer defend removal restrictions for administrative law judges against challenges in court. The Justice Department's policy shift comes as Republican President Donald Trump and his ally, the billionaire Elon Musk, seek to reduce the power of several federal regulatory agencies. And here's the key right here. It also comes after several decisions curbing the authority of U.S. agencies by the Supreme Court, whose conservative justices have indicated skepticism toward expansive regulatory power. And yeah, that's kind of part of it, but more appropriately and more accurately, they have chosen to acknowledge that the executive branch's power is controlled by the executive, and that the executive branch cannot make itself first of all, you can't have independent agencies, and then those independent agencies can't take over the duties of the legislative branch, and they can't take over the duties of the judicial branch. So we are told that the Congress can, by statute, create independent agencies, and the judicial branch has affirmed that the Congress can do that in Humphrey's executor, as we discussed the other day, and a couple other decisions. And once they have then created these independent agencies under the executive branch, those independent agencies give themselves legislative authority and judicial authority. They can create rules and regulations, which are essentially laws under a different name that govern the behavior of the American people and their businesses. And then those same independent agencies can be investigator, prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner, all on their own, unaccountable to the president or anyone else. They exist outside of the government at that point, and their agenda somehow mirrors the agenda of the global regime as implemented through the Uniparty and the unaccountable administrative bureaucracy, the deep state. And you can't remove them. That's how things work. That is a shadow government set up to do the work of the foreign occupation, totally unaccountable to the constitutional branches of government, which means they are totally unaccountable to the American people. Last year, the Supreme Court rejected as unconstitutional the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's use of in-house law judges to decide enforcement actions protecting investors from securities fraud. Conservative and business groups have said that the SEC has an unfair advantage litigating cases before its own judges. Administrative judges operate separately from judges who preside over federal courts, who are known as Article III judges for the section of the U.S. Constitution that established the judiciary. Administrative judges adjudicate matters within agencies that come under the executive branch, which includes Social Security, the Department of Labor, and the DEA, and many others. The case they're referring to is SEC v. Jarkisi, or I could have that reversed. A spokesperson for the Association of Administrative Law Judges, a union that represents 910 administrative law judges who adjudicate cases at the Social Security Administration, said the group was waiting for more information. So there's 910 of these just at the Social Security Administration. And then you have them at all these other agencies and departments as well. That's insane. None of them should exist. They have no ability to actually adjudicate anything, according to the Supreme Court, bringing this back step by step to the original terms of the Constitution. And this case in particular is whether or not Donald Trump is allowed to fire these people who, according to the Constitution and now backed up by the Supreme Court, are not allowed to do the job they're doing. And they have unions representing them and unions contesting the executive's ability to remove the people who now constitutionally don't have jobs. All of this is good. This is all good news. But the situation prior was an abomination. According to the Constitution, the founders would never imagine a people who would allow such a thing to ever take place. And this is just what we were told throughout our lives. Anytime a president would threaten it, well, that's the president trying to subvert checks and balances, the checks on his own power. We were told by the television, and still are, by the way, and most of America, much of America, maybe most, believes that's actually how it's supposed to be, that there are checks within the executive branch on the president's power. I went to public school, and my public school didn't even teach me that was okay. Lenny the Q, $5. Love this show. Thank you very much. Julie Beans, $5. Polymathanon rant challenge accepted and matched. Thank you. A Dig, $5. I got 5 on it. We got a bunch of people throwing subscriptions out there today. I think Julie Beans and Yorko PJ Corrigan, $5. I got 5 on it. Grab your 40. Let's get keyed. Appreciate you, Chris. Man, in college, I had a bad night with 40s. I didn't realize they were malt liquor. I just thought they were really big beers. Whoo, bad news. AJC, $10. Okie doke. Polymath Anon, money well spent. Mrs. Watley, $5. I'll see your $5. Polymath Anon, always a pleasure, Chris. Parent, 5 times. $5. I support Chris. Jennifer Lynn, $20. Always appreciate your shows. Man, hey, for those of you listening to the audio version of this podcast, apologies, I guess, but thank you, everyone who's in the chat. Maggie D gifted a subscription. Makes sense to me, too, $5. Yep. All right, I think we're all the way there. Polymath just gifted a subscription. Ronnie, 79, thanks, Chris, $5. Thank you. Okay, we're back to business here. Getting back to business. Speaking of firings, this is the old gray lady, the paper of record, the New York Times itself. IRS fires 6,700 employees amid tax filing season. And that is what you will hear. That is the slogan that will be repeated in every story about the IRS firings. You have to understand that we are in tax season. And so this isn't Trump being mean just to them. This is Trump being mean to you because your tax refund is going to be delayed if you're filing your taxes. If the Trump administration started firing about 6,700 employees at the IRS on Thursday, according to people familiar with the matter, extending its cost-cutting measures to the federal agency responsible for collecting tax revenue from millions of Americans. Oh, it's revenue, you see. This is what the government needs to keep going. It's almost like they're earning money. The job cuts at the IRS are hitting probationary employees who were recently hired around the country. More than 5,000 of those workers are part of the agency's compliance teams, which deal with auditing and collections. The layoffs are coming a week during tax filing season. What does that even mean? Coming during a week? I mean, what? When you're the New York Times, do better. When the IRS will be inundated with paperwork and questions from taxpayers. The IRS employs about 100,000 accountants, lawyers, and other staff across the country. Sad. The Biden administration was in the process of beefing up enforcement and modernizing the agency with an $80 billion investment. But President Trump wants to curb its powers and has dispatched Elon Musk and his so-called Doge to scrutinize. I think there was one other thing here. In emails sent on Wednesday, IRS managers told employees targeted for layoffs that they were not considered critical to filing season, the annual period when millions of Americans prepare their taxes. The National Treasury Employees Union, which represents IRS workers, assailed the layoff as a critical mistake by the Trump administration. The labor group called the firings arbitrary and unlawful. Indiscriminate firings of IRS employees around the country are a recipe for disaster. In the middle of a tax season, when taxpayers expect prompt customer service and smooth processing of their tax returns, the administration has chosen to decimate the whole operation by sending dedicated civil servants to the unemployment lines. Well, didn't they just tell us that they were probationary employees? And didn't they just tell us that they were the people working on audits and collections? Oh, yes, we're going to miss them. Oh, the American people are probably crying right now. Also, the Trump administration fired 243 probationary employees at the Trump Security Administration. All right. I can't read. That's the problem. Transportation Security Administration. There's no Trump Security Administration. Not yet. In all honesty, they're all the Trump Security Administration. He's king, remember? The agency confirmed on Thursday. Those let go included TSA officers and other administrative staff. We're going to miss them, of course. Despite the cuts, the agency said It is continuing to hire mission-critical positions. TSA, which is part of the Homeland Security Department, was formed after 9/11. Congress has charged the agency with protecting the nation's transportation systems. And what would we do without them? Oh, the same thing we were doing before. Under President Trump's leadership, TSA terminated personnel due to performance and conduct issues during their probationary period. The agency is actively working to implement the administration's priorities in full cooperation with DHS to identify waste and to staff the mission essential positions that best fulfill DHS's mission, a spokesman said. The CIA also moved to dismiss an unspecified number of officers who were working on recruiting and diversity issues, according to former officials. A federal judge has halted those actions and will hold a hearing on Monday on whether the CIA can proceed with the dismissals, which would be the largest mass firing since 1977, nearly 50 years. Rocks cry out, $10. Appreciate you. I'm your moderator. Thank you. And someone in the chat just said, I also saw I had to pay $4.99 tax just to send out the $5 rant. Well, that's very interesting and strange because I think that ultimately we only end up getting 50% of that. So, firings at the IRS. Let us continue on with that from the Associated Press. And now, again, I firmly believe, and I don't think that it is a matter of belief, I think it's just clear and obvious that A, the 16th Amendment was not properly ratified, and neither were the rest of them, and that despite the 16th Amendment, the federal income tax is unconstitutional. It also happens to be voluntary. It also happens to be a request from the government that you pay them to waste your money in a way that is exploitative of you and counter to your own needs. And if you are going to do that for a government meant to be of, by, and for the people, that is not of the people, not by the people, and not for the people, well, then you might be insane. So this is CNN from the afternoon yesterday. Employees described chaos, heightened emotions, and added security at IRS offices. All right, so we're just going to cut to the quotes here. One IRS employee told CNN, emotions are high. People are arguing with management, throwing books, kicking chairs in frustration. The bottom line is this wasn't handled with care, and these people have no idea where their next paycheck will come from. So the people tasked with collecting your taxes and potentially auditing you on behalf of the global regime's fiat currency banking system are throwing books and kicking chairs because they are losing their jobs. Now, as I say every time we discuss this, I don't wish ill on people. I don't want people to lose their jobs. I don't want them to worry about how they're going to feed their kids or pay their mortgage or rent, whatever it is, right? But also, you're making other people pay you by force to do a job those people don't want you to do. And a job that facilitates the most evil and corrupt government maybe in the history of mankind. And so the extent to which we are going to be able to feel sorry for you, well, that's not, there's not much of that in our culture. And I'm probably not going to be able to find the post, so I'm not going to take the time to attempt it. But I think it's called, I don't know what it's called. It's something on like Fed Post or something on Reddit. There's this Reddit page. I don't know what they call them on Reddit because I don't spend much time on there. I don't spend any time. Where these federal workers are responding to what's happening in the Trump administration. And one of them said that they were going through comments or articles or something realizing that actually there's not this wealth of support across the American public for these federal workers and their plight. Like just finding this out, because of course they are totally addicted to the central narrative, get their information about the broader reality from various television sources, whether it's newspapers or websites or social media or cable channels or television shows or whatever, where everyone actually believes that all of these people are the most honorable public servants who've ever existed, and they're the people making America great. That's not true at all. The American people don't actually believe that. And it's not like everyone thinks that every single public employee is the enemy, and I certainly don't. All right. I know people who have worked for the government, and some of them are very close to me, and I don't agree with them about their viewpoints on government, but I know that they're not bad people, and that they went to work and tried to work hard and do a good job, and that they were committed to their work. Okay. So I understand all that. At the same time, there is a public sector out there that is productive and actually benefits society. And if government is an adversary of that, and that's what it is now, and it's not being productive and it's not benefiting society, and instead just a bunch of people with a golden ticket on the gravy train to get a free ride, there aren't going to be people out there that have sympathy for this. And the fact that everyone knew this was coming for years and years, these people, of course, were in denial. They've had ample time to prepare and to find other jobs in the private sector. They've also been given the opportunity to take 8 months to find a job like that or start a business or whatever, while they're getting paid really good salaries out of the public coffers. So, yeah, the sympathy for this, it's just not there. Employees are crying. Managers are crying. We are losing really good employees. It's very gloomy, and everyone is very angry. I don't know what you can say about that. Sorry. Let's hear what Morning Joe has to say about it. My friend, The Storm Has Arrived 17, posted this. Actually, he's changed his name now. He's The Storm Redu.
I mean, Allie, anybody that's ever dealt with the IRS and calling them for any reason understands that most of those workers there have such a backlog. It takes so long to get in touch with agents because they just don't have enough workers. They're also working with data and they're working on computers that in many cases are decades old. Their technology is absolutely horrific. And at the end of the day, of course, maybe politicians want to paint the IRS as the bad guys, and because they audited Donald Trump too much, Donald Trump would say. In the end of the day, it is working Americans trying to get their refund. It's middle-class Americans trying to get the refunds they can't afford. The lawyers or whatever millionaires and billionaires can afford to take care of their problems with the IRS. It's going to be working class and middle class taxpayers who are going to be impacted by this. And you can go down the line.
And, he might be right that there are going to be working class and middle class taxpayers impacted by this. When I was in the mainstream system, I don't recall ever depending on or waiting on a tax refund, but I am aware that there are people out there doing that. And to the extent that they have to wait to get their money, sorry about that. I wonder if that's actually going to happen or if this is just fear mongering. We're going to see in a couple of months whether or not that happens. I don't think anybody should be paying their taxes. That's just me. Or filing in the first place. But the IRS has to be abolished. Donald Trump has gone out. He said no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. So there's already these classes of taxpayers who are just not getting taxed in those ways. Why shouldn't that apply to everyone else? Why would tip income not be taxable while other income is? And, there are maybe technical and pragmatic reasons for that. But in principled terms, there's no reason for that. The American people should not be paying the federal income tax, period. Trump is trying to abolish the IRS, and he's trying to fund the federal government with tariffs. So there is a solution available to Americans who want to take it, although I understand that a lot of people have taxes taken out throughout the year, and for them, there's not much solution other than to file and to get that refund to the extent there's going to be one. So we can feel bad for those people, and we can feel bad for people who are losing their jobs. Nonetheless, this system is an abomination, and it has to be removed. You can either have it happen now or happen later. And, it's also worth noting that big parts of the federal government and that bureaucratic administrative state in particular, and our state governments and local governments went out and destroyed people's businesses, okay? And destroyed people's reputations, destroyed their ability to earn an income throughout the very deadly pandemic. I was one of those people. I can't even tell you how much money that cost me. And it cost me a social network of thousands of people in a major American metropolis where it is very, very difficult to build a high-level social network, that people spend in their entire lives attempting to do that in the way I was able to do it. And I'm not trying to puff myself up. I'm just saying, the extent to which a person like me is going to be able to have sympathy for that, it's not there. And if the Great Reset is happening and it's coming for everybody, or even if we're able to divert that, it's still coming for everyone at some point, because ultimately the end game for that is the collapse of the fiat currency. Whoever's committed to the fiat system and has all their money there and has not prepared for that system is going to have it hit them too. And so we're talking about government employees who were the safest out of anyone throughout that process in 2020. And we are supposed to feel sympathy about this. I find myself unable to do that on this kind of base level. I have sympathy for what these people are going to have to deal with, but they were, some of them, partially responsible for what everyone else had to deal with, and they were able to avoid that. And so for them to have to experience what the rest of us experienced without any warning, these people have had 4 and 5 years warning. Man, it's difficult. Let us continue. We doing okay on time? I guess we're doing all right on time. Let's try to speed through some of these, because I would like to get some of that COVID stuff done before we wrap up the week, because I think that we're getting a lot of narrative seeding for another anti-Trump attempt. This is the Washington Post. I think it was from yesterday, but updated today. Trump expected to take control of the U.S. Postal Service and fire the Postal Board. So this story has already been refuted by the White House, but let's go through it because some of this will be just some background knowledge that may become important. Trump's order to place the Commerce Department in charge of the Postal Service would probably violate federal law, according to postal experts. So, A, no, it won't. B, postal experts. Shouldn't you be talking to constitutional experts? Federal law. The Constitution is the federal law. Everything built on top of the Constitution is a lower level of federal law that has to comport to the Constitution. And to the extent to which it doesn't comport to the Constitution, it is invalid. Another executive order earlier this week instructed independent agencies to align more closely with the White House. That's not exactly what it instructed them to do. though that order is likely to prompt court challenges, and the Postal Service, by law, is generally exempt from executive orders. Well, that is because, of course, the Congress made the Postal Service an independent agency in 1970. And what's going to happen to that now? Of course, that's all going to be overturned. Members of the Postal Service's bipartisan board, unipartisan board, always, when the word bipartisan appears, read it as unipartisan, because that's what it is. Appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, blah, blah, blah. Trump, at Lutnick's urging, has mused about privatizing the Postal Service, and Trump's presidential transition team vetted candidates to replace Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, a retired logistics executive and GOP fundraising official who took office in 2020 during Trump's first term. And you might remember that there was great pushback to that, to DeJoy taking over. They were worried about mail-in balloting for the election. They were worried about having the mail-in balloting monitored. The Postal Service also has its own intelligence branch now. And then, of course, there was the mailboxes hoax, where people in Los Angeles in particular went crazy, believing that Donald Trump was taking away the blue mailboxes in order to give himself an electoral advantage. And of course, that was mis and dis and malinformation that was allowed to remain online. And people who contested that, like myself, had our reputations maligned. Blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of talk about the Postal Service being taken private, Trump said in December. It's a lot different today between Amazon and UPS and FedEx and all the things you didn't have, but there is talk about that. It's an idea that a lot of people have liked for a long time. Now, there's going to be pushback to that because the Postal Service is in the Constitution and it's protected to that extent. Who knows how it will be changed and amended over time. One of the commenters that the Washington Post chose to cite says this is a somewhat regal approach that says the king knows better than his subjects and he will do his best for them. And there was a freak out the other day about Trump basically making himself king in regards to the tolls being charged to traverse the bridges into Manhattan. People were being charged $9 a day to travel into the city via the bridges. They wanted to do that to minimize what they called congestion traffic. There were too many cars traveling into New York City. So what we're going to do is make sure that none of the people who can't afford these astronomical charges will be able to travel into the city. And the tolls on the bridges into the different boroughs of New York City are already astronomical. I think like it's not called the Tappan Zee. I think it's called the Cuomo Bridge or something now. It's like $20 or something. It's preposterous. Let's continue, though. The immediate effects of moving the Postal Service into the Commerce Department are uncertain. And again, they said this is not what we're doing. The Postal Regulatory Commission has direct oversight of the mail system and closely watches for geographic discrimination in delivery service and prices. It's unclear if Trump's order will affect that group as well. And they are the worry here, the fear being spread is that rural clients, rural people who live in rural areas will not have the post office at their disposal any longer. I have strong doubts about that. So, Postal Reorganization Act of 1970, that's what I mentioned before, walling it off from political tinkering. That's what's happening. Americans love the Postal Service. DeJoy is also considering, or maybe is about to announce his retirement. Trump has long had a tense relationship with the mail agency. He once derided it from the Oval Office as a joke and in a social media post as Amazon's delivery boy. In the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, Trump threatened to withhold emergency assistance from the Postal Service unless it quadrupled package prices, and Mnuchin authorized a loan for the mail agency only in exchange for access to its confidential contracts with top customers. Very interesting, isn't it? There is mention here, right here at the end. So there's pushback from some establishment based in red pill conservatives like Josh Hawley and James Comer, which is interesting considering that the pushback in 2020 was all coming from the Uniparty left. And they end here by saying Republicans have grown wary of DeJoy and the Postal Service's close ties to the Biden administration. The two partnered to deliver nearly 1 billion coronavirus test kits, the largest expansion of postal capabilities in a generation, and to fund a fleet of more than 60,000 electric mail delivery vehicles, though those were plagued by delivery delays. And so some of this sounds a little devolution-y, and John and I may have some conversation about that tomorrow. And if we find anything interesting, of course, we will present that on Devolution Power. Let's go to some Donald Trump Truth Social posts on what's happening in Congress with the budget stuff that's on its way for mid-March. This was Donald Trump from yesterday. Actually, hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm doing these in the right order. Yes, here we are. I was about to make a huge mistake. We would have quickly gotten through it, but huge mistake nonetheless. So I discussed this on Wednesday's episode. That, by the way, if you're not a paid Substack subscriber, that will become available on Rumble, YouTube, and podcast apps, barring Spotify, of course, because I'm still banned from Spotify, on Sunday morning. This is Trump from Wednesday. The House and Senate are doing a spectacular job of working together as one unified and unbeatable team. However, unlike the Lindsey Graham version of the very important legislation currently being discussed, the House resolution implements my full America First agenda, everything, not just parts of it. We need both chambers to pass the House's budget to kickstart the reconciliation process and move all our priorities to the concept of one big, beautiful bill. It will, without question, make America great again. So we went through that on Wednesday. Trump followed up yesterday. And by the way, on Wednesday, I said, with my same opinion that I've had now for well over 2 years, way back from Kevin McCarthy budget stuff through Mike Johnson's package, all the different versions we've seen of Mike Johnson's package, and now through whatever Mike Johnson's package will look like in a month. And it's been through a lot, so who knows? My stance has always been no budget, no more spending, no more laws. Congress has no right to legislate. It is totally illegitimate. The House and Senate, none of them can prove their legitimacy in office. And until they can do that, none of them should be in office. And none of them certainly should be legislating and telling the American people what to do and how they're planning to spend our money. I don't believe there's any justification for any of it. And, you know, again, I'm happy to be the one that's the farthest out on this stuff. I am happy to be the psycho, as it were. All good. But if you're not legitimate, you certainly should not be telling us how to spend money. Also, the government should be shut down. There should be no more money spent. Any money that has already been appropriated can be reassigned to the vital functions of government, if there are vital functions, and I don't believe there are. Donald J. Trump on Truth Social yesterday, balanced budget now? Question mark, question mark, question mark. The entire thing in caps. Let's give it a shot. Lots of money coming in from tariffs. Do it. DJT. So the tariffs, as we just heard the other day, are by and large not supposed to begin, at least the reciprocal tariffs, until April. So the budget stuff's going to have to be done before then, but there's going to be lots of money coming in from tariffs. So maybe we can just balance the budget right now. So he wants one big, beautiful bill that implements the entire America First agenda, and he wants a balanced budget. All of those things are probably impossible, but Donald Trump has been pushing for them. He's been saying, hey, man, if you guys can't get the budget done, it's not me. I've been trying to get the budget done. I've been putting all my presidential might behind this from this here bully pulpit I have. Let's get it done. He encouraged Senate Majority Leader John Thune yesterday. Thank you to Majority Leader John Thune and the Republican Senate for working so hard on funding the Trump border agenda. We are setting records, the likes of which have never been seen before, on stopping criminal illegal aliens from entering our country. Put simply, we are delivering for the American people far faster and more successfully than anyone thought possible. Your work on funding this effort is greatly appreciated. So he is giving the encouragement, the support. He's doing whatever he can to get this here budget passed so that we can keep government going. Donald Trump is letting everybody know we need this budget passed to implement my America First agenda. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Will we cheer about that? Yes. Will the Uniparty right tell us that we need to fund government? Yes, they will. And will the Uniparty right, based in red-pilled influencers on all the normie TV shows and podcasts, Daily Weimar and Blaze and Tucker Carlson and all them, go right along with the Uniparty right politicians? Probably. And that'll be a good sign that they are not on our side. And it doesn't matter how Trump handles the narrative, okay? If Trump wants us to understand the actual truth of the underlying reality, not as the regime puts it forward, but as it exists, so that he can move us out of the controlled opposition dynamic, we do not have to just applaud and agree with everything he says, okay? If we know where he's going, which is to restore America back to the form the founders intended, the original Constitution or before, then we can know what that looks like, and we can push for that even when Donald Trump is not pushing for it. So that when we get to the point where the Uniparty right is telling us, we have to do this, and fear-mongering about how if we don't do this, wow, we're going to be invaded by more aliens. We can say, come on, guys, that's not going to work. What do you mean it's not going to work? Even Donald Trump is telling you to go along with what we say. That's okay, guys. We're not going to do it. It's not because we don't support Trump. It's because we don't support you. And we know where Donald Trump is going. And he tells us where he's going. He says multiple things for multiple reasons. We can't necessarily know what all those reasons are, but we can know what the objective goal is underneath that. And more importantly, we are the American people. We choose the objective goal. All right? Government of, by, and for the people. Donald Trump is there to implement the will and agenda of the American people. And of course, he has better access to information, and he is dealing with the system as it exists, not the ideal, but we can still push toward the ideal so that he has the momentum already built in the public to be able to drive toward that goal. And we deprive him of that momentum when we spend all our time cheerleading and trying to figure out what the meaning of his desk is. And I'm not saying it's totally pointless. It's fun, all right? We learn little things along in the process, but we do not have to cheerlead Donald Trump. We should be front running to the extent we can so that we drag our fellow Americans along with us to that understanding, so that when Donald Trump needs a critical mass to be able to move forward, that critical mass exists. If we had taken that approach to election fraud over the last 5 years, where would we be now? And instead, we took the approach from the normies and the trust the planners and everyone else and said, we need to vote as hard as possible. We need to vote as hard as possible. Don't get out too far ahead of this stuff. We know where it's all going. Where's it going? Let's stick with the Senate and stick with even Republican majority leaders. This is the outgoing one from the Associated Press. There is the turtle himself, Cocaine Mitch, Glitch McConnell, won't seek re-election in 2026 and ending long tenure as Republican power broker. Too bad, so sad. Mitch is not coming back. let us recall Glitch in all his glory. And I find this clip particularly interesting because of the question that caused him to glitch in the first place. And hold for processing just a moment here. Here he is. Okay. Okay, we are basically there.
What are my thoughts about what? Running for re-election in 2026.
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator. Benny.
So the question, of course, was, what are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026? And at that point, Mitch has a 1,000-yard stare. And upon being asked if he heard the question, affirms that, yes, he did hear the question. He's just looking. He looks horrified. And he does not answer the question. I don't know what that means. I can guess at what that means, but I certainly don't know. So any guess I would make would be speculation, the stuff of conspiracy theory. It's the sort of thing that would mean that we could no longer be taken seriously by the people who wore masks, took vaccines, and then supported Ron DeSantis. They wouldn't take us seriously for speculating about things like this. So should we speculate about them? Yes. Mitch McConnell seems like he is fully and completely controlled. That is my speculation. I have a video of Mitch from his statement yesterday. For a second, I had the moment of horror where I think, oh man, I forgot to play this video from before. And the truth is I did, but we can either do without it or I'll just play it at the end. Here is Mitch McConnell yesterday.
I've never liked calling too much attention to today's date, February 20th. But I figured my birthday would be as good a day as any to share with our colleagues a decision I made last year. During my time in the Senate, I've only really answered to two constituencies: the Republican Conference and the people of Kentucky. Over the years, the first group trusted me to coordinate campaigns, to count votes, to steer committees, to take the majority, and on 9 occasions to lead our conference. Serving as a Republican leader was a rare and, yes, rather specific childhood dream. And just about a year ago, I thanked my colleagues for their confidence, which allowed me to fulfill it.
So Mitch knew a year ago that he was not going to run for re-election, and he didn't bother telling anyone until now. It's not me saying it, it's him saying it. And of course, he froze up before saying it last time. Was he kept in place? Are people kept in place? Was Dianne Feinstein kept in place as looking like the crypt keeper for some duration? How many others have been kept in place? Elections are fake. We're probably under some form of military government. And there are things happening in the background that we can guess at but have no access to that are bigger than most people might imagine in terms of realistic options for how American politics could progress. And so I would suggest that maybe Mitch has been kept in place for some period of time. And you got to wonder why. Maybe now he's finally being allowed to leave. Well, regardless, immediately upon this announcement, we were told by all of media that Daniel Cameron would step up and run in his place. Now, Daniel Cameron has run a few different races in Kentucky. Most recently, I think he ran against Andy Beshear in Kentucky's fake elections for Kentucky governor, and Beshear, the Democrat, was reelected. Daniel Cameron is wasting no time in his run. Now, Daniel Cameron spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2020 on Donald Trump's behalf. I don't know if he's an ally or an enemy. I don't know if he's Uniparty right or if he's full-on MAGA. I guess we'll find out in the future. But it's going to be very interesting. We're going to learn a lot about Kentucky politics over the next year or so. Maybe someone else will step up to run. I don't know. So Mitch McConnell, on the same day that he announced to his colleagues that he would not be running for re-election, also went ahead and voted in favor of one Kash Patel to confirm Kash as FBI director. Now, before all that went down, old watermelon head himself, Shifty Adam Schiff, had a press conference, a little makeshift press conference outside of the FBI. Here is Shifty, and this was put together, I'm not sure by whom online. It might have been Pepe Lives Matter. That's whose label is on it, but I've also seen it on some other fairly prominent accounts. So I'm not sure who made this, who I should give credit to, but anyhow, here's Adam Schiff, followed by Kash Patel.
Someone we cannot trust. This is someone who lacks the character to do this job, someone who lacks the integrity to do this job. We know that. Our Republican colleagues know that. The only qualification Kash Patel has to be FBI director is that when everyone else in the first Trump administration said, no, I won't do that, that crosses moral, ethical, and legal lines, Kash Patel said, sign me up. In the first Trump administration, as we are seeing in the second, you rise to the level of your sycophancy, and no one is a bigger or more dangerous sycophant than Kash Patel. This political hack does not deserve to be in this building. He can't do the job. He won't protect the public. He will misuse the resources of the Bureau. He will weaponize it against the president's political opponents rather than protecting the safety, the public safety of the American people.
Adam Schiff is the worst criminal in Congress in the last 250 years. And what broke that we're going to talk about right now is Adam Schiff met with a whistleblower. Adam Schiff went to the podium day after day after day saying, I know nothing about this. We're not going to discuss it. We're going to protect it. And then Adam Schiff, led the prosecution of the impeachment trial in the Senate of President Donald Trump. Talk about someone who was conflicted out of the game because he was part of the hoax that brought Charmella in, manufactured that false accusation, and then peddled it out to the world, and he continued, not surprising, he's lied about almost everything in his life. But now he lied just to set up a presidential impeachment. And that's what I was talking about, these disinformation campaigns. And then he should be investigated because he lied to the world about his interactions with Charmella, who was a whistleblower, and I can't stress it enough, that started a presidential impeachment. Now, your history is way better than mine, but I can't remember the last time a president was actually impeached. It's a significant process and escalation, and it's reserved for the time when it actually shows a crime, not when it shows the manufacture of fake information to show a fake crime. The guy that found and manufactured the evidence with Charmella was the prosecutor in the case against the target of the investigation. That is the ultimate, from a prosecutorial standpoint, conflict of interest. But he knew what he was doing, and he thought he would never get exposed. And I think thanks to, I think it was John Solomon and his fantastic reporting, we now see what I've been saying for years, that I thought he met with him for sure, and it will come out, and it now has.
And so, of course, that's assumed to be the reason why Adam Schiff is so worried about Kash Patel's confirmation. It went through. Collins and Murkowski declined to support Kash Patel. He then created a brand new Twitter account. FBI Director Kash. Elon Musk then quickly followed, by the way. And he said yesterday, I am honored to be confirmed as the 9th director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Thank you to President Trump and Attorney General Bondi for your unwavering confidence and support. The FBI has a storied legacy from the G-men to safeguarding our nation in the wake of 9/11. The American people deserve an FBI that is transparent, accountable, and committed to justice. Politicization of our justice system has eroded public trust, but that ends today. My mission as director is clear. Let good cops be cops and rebuild trust in the FBI. Working alongside the dedicated men and women of the Bureau and our partners, we will rebuild an FBI the American people can be proud of. And to those who seek to harm Americans, consider this your warning. We will hunt you down in every corner of this planet. Mission first, America always. Let's get to work. And I have very high hopes for Kash Patel. One of the main things people think that Kash is going to do is hold true to his statement, or promise. I don't know if promise is too strong a word, about getting the Epstein list out on day one. Now, I think that, he was confirmed by the Senate. He's got to be sworn into office. I was told that was happening this afternoon. I'm not sure if that has happened because obviously I've been on here. If anyone has that, you're more than welcome to put that in the chat. In terms of the Epstein stuff, Pam Bondi was questioned by Benny Johnson yesterday at CPAC, and maybe I can find this quickly. Darn, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to. That's a bit annoying. I thought I was going to be able to find that one. I do have the other Bondi clip from today. Yeah, that's not, we're going to have to forego that. Here is Pam Bondi on Fox News today.
They may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Now, I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that means. But as I've suggested for quite a while now, I think that the Epstein and Diddy thing and probably these assassination files are probably going to be rug pulls akin to the Twitter files. I don't know that's true, but I don't know. People have high hopes. I do not share those high hopes. Maybe I am pessimistic about that one. I also don't think that other people outside of Donald Trump need to be responsible for this stuff. I am quite certain that a lot of people think that the wins have already been achieved. And when we get limited hangout versions of a lot of this stuff, the same people who thought the Twitter files were big wins are going to think this stuff is a big win too. I hope I am wrong about that, but I really do have my doubts, I got to say. Let's take just a second. I'm going to do another one of these Rumble ads, and then we will get into, I think we're going to have time for that COVID stuff. So this here is Patriot Addict. Patriot Addict is giving away Trump mystery boxes absolutely free. No hidden charges, no recurring fees, none of that BS, just cover shipping. If you're interested, go ahead and scan the QR code now. Imagine unpacking Trump gold bars, Trump socks, Trump beanie hats, and who knows what else. But hurry, stocks are flying off the shelves, and we would not want you to miss it. Don't wait. Scan the QR code now and get your free Trump mystery box. How about that? That was short and sweet. Very short, very sweet. Good. That allows us just to quickly continue. Here is one last thing before we go to the COVID stuff. This is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent giving us his version of the lowdown on Fort Knox. We talked about that on Wednesday.
One thing potentially that could happen, and people are questioning it, is maybe remarking gold. Elon Musk, who's leading Doge, was talking about maybe going to Fort Knox to make sure those gold reserves are there. That comes under your purview. Do you have any plans to visit Kentucky?
I don't have any plans. I can tell you that we do an audit every year. I can tell the American people on camera right now that there was a report September 30th, 2024. All the gold is there. Any U.S. senator who wants to come and visit it can arrange a visit through our office.
Gold was your biggest holding when you were a hedge fund manager before you divested to become the Treasury Secretary. So you know the value of where gold is right now versus where it's marked on its balance sheet, just north of $40 an ounce. It's close to $3,000. Is it under consideration for this administration to revalue gold?
I think that somehow when we were talking about the sovereign wealth fund and I said monetize the balance sheet, I can promise you that's not what I had in mind.
So what will we see? Will Elon Musk go? Will Donald Trump go? Will we see gold in Fort Knox or not? If we see gold in Fort Knox, will that mean that the gold is in Fort Knox? Unfortunately, no, it will not. And I know that sort of thing upsets people, but that is the age in which we live. A couple Rumble rants came through. Polymathanon, $5 just to round out the show. Thank you so much, Chris, for your work. You are a vital voice through all the noise. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very kind words. And thank you for your consistent and constant support. I guess those are the same thing. Maggie D8, $5. Can we chip in to buy Chris a very small, subtle backlight? I think the answer there is no. The ultimate question would be, will I use it? You can do it. Probably won't make a difference. PJ Corrigan, $5. Chris, you are a gentleman and a scholar, and you are a calm voice of reason through uncertain times. Your top shelf brother. Thank you very much, PJ, my friend. And I don't know if I'm going to see you in Vegas or not. I don't know if you're going, but if you are, then I will see you there. It was good to meet you. Where were we? In Irvine? It was like a year or so ago. Someone just sent through. Let me figure out who it was who sent through this link so I can properly thank you. C. Rizzle. S33RIZL. I don't know how you say that. Let's just guess that it's Cirizzle. Sent through the link to Kash's swearing in today. Pam Bondi is doing the honors.
Place your hand on the guitar and raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear.
I, Kash Patel, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully.
And that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
So there he is. Congratulations to Kash Patel. I am very supportive of Kash Patel. I think he's a great guy, seems to know his stuff inside and out. He's very, very good at communicating it to the American public. I have no doubt that his intentions are good. I hope he does wonderful, wonderful things in office. He's actually been on my podcast twice, and I'm not sure how to find those now. I keep saying I'm going to put them up on Substack. I will do that. I'll make sure that I do that at some point. Maybe I'll have those play while we're at GART in a couple of weeks or something. But that being said, I posted yesterday on Truth and Telegram just wondering which one of the founders would have been most stoked about watching us all lose our minds just apoplectic in worship of the fact that a body, the Senate, of people who can't prove their own legitimacy in office, barely getting past 50% to confirm the director of a federal police force, something that many of them were adamantly against. Many of the founders were against a standing army. And these are just things that we take for granted right now. Well, if the FBI's not there, who's going to investigate federal crimes? Hey, why are there so many federal crimes? Why doesn't anybody ever question that? There are state level crimes, and the states can take care pretty much all the crimes. The federal crimes are crimes against the federal government, crimes over the things like interstate commerce or treason that are under the federal government's purview. At least that's how they were initially. And then, of course, after the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment, we began to get all sorts of civil rights laws and the rest of it. And now the federal government, through agency regulations and the rest of it, has the power to investigate people for the sorts of things that the American people would never agree they should ever be held accountable for, which means that our government, by and large, is just totally illegitimate. If the government does all these things that the people would never actually delegate to it the power to do, then our government is illegitimate. And we have to really, really come to that understanding. Let us move into the COVID stuff. So, just to summarize, I can be entirely supportive of Kash Patel and wish him well in his position, and also believe that the FBI should be abolished as soon as possible and not replaced with anything, and that it should not have the authority to do the things it does. If Kash is in there to dismantle it, might be just some streamlining. I know I'm not going to get the things that I want. Well, we should be still pressing forward. If he's going to reduce the size, potentially dismantle it, and disclose to the American people everything the FBI has done, all the investigations it's done on the American people without their knowledge, all the work it's done to compromise politicians and make the politicians do as they're told by the regime to keep that Uniparty apparatus in place, then good on him. I would love to see him do all those things. I don't think an FBI director is required for those purposes, but I'm willing to be patient and see how the situation evolves. We discussed on Badlands Daily this morning an article from Just the News talking about how the FBI director would be subverted by senior level people in the FBI. And so we'll see how that goes. So let's shift to the COVID nonsense. This is from today. New coronavirus discovered in Chinese bats sparks alarm. How about that? 5 years ago, we were doing this very same thing. The impeachment hoax number one, the Ukraine impeachment hoax, had just fallen apart. We began hearing about the Chinese coronavirus in late 2019. February 27th, if my memory serves, was the day that Anthony Fauci on CBS 60 Minutes told us that you don't need to wear a mask. It may catch a stray droplet, but blah, blah, blah. Don't need to wear a mask. And then a few months later, we had Anthony Fauci wearing 2 masks. And if you're going to wear 2, why not wear 3? I mean, it does, as he said, provide that extra layer of protection. What can you do? We have a new coronavirus, potentially, a new bat coronavirus that has the capacity to spread to humans, similar to the one that caused the COVID-19 pandemic, has been discovered. Led by a Chinese research team by I don't know the Chinese pronunciation. I think it's Shi Zhengli Somebody out there can correct me. It's probably terrible. Known as Batwoman for her work on coronaviruses, especially at the Wuhan Institute, which has been at the center of the theory suggesting COVID-19 came from a lab leak, something she has denied. So we get coronavirus number 2. Here she is, by the way, in one of the most ridiculous pictures of all time, showing us what they wear to protect themselves from viruses. But for us, just a little designer mask like Nancy Pelosi wears will do. Let me find the picture. Hold for processing. The best one is when, as part of the hoax, they knelt for another hoax, that being the George Floyd hoax. And here's old Nancy not even wearing her mask properly. How could she? Ah, look at them. Is this called a dashiki? Is that what that is? Mask, mask, mask. Mask, maybe. Statue, no mask. Nancy, no mask. Mask on the chin. Nancy had a lot of stylish masks. I wonder if there's a top 10 list. If there's, oh my gosh, of course there is. HuffPost has one. New York Times has one. Vogue, Harper's Bazaar. Let's do Vogue because that's the most highfalutin fashion magazine presenting Nancy's masks. Vogue, May 13th, 2020. Look at old Nancy. Look at that beautiful mask she's got, color coordinated to her outfit. White on white. Not quite matching, but I guess it works. With her orange. Pink on pink. Hillary Clinton showing off Nancy's style. There are a bunch of those. Unbelievable, isn't it? That's where we were, and people took all of that very seriously. So this week, there's been a number of COVID-related and vaccine-related pieces. And whenever there is an issue, a subject that seems to be bubbling up into the mainstream where it wasn't prior, I assume that the story is being rerun for a reason. And so we've had a number of these today. This is a study that is a journal pre-proof. This is ScienceDirect.com. I believe that means it's been through peer review. But if you are at one with the science in the chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong about that. Disclose posted this yesterday saying Moderna study. Wait, hold on. They said a peer-reviewed study confirms that mRNA injections cross the placenta and reach the fetuses of pregnant mice. Intramuscular mRNA 1273 injection, Moderna's mRNA vaccine for humans, rapidly crosses the placenta within 1 hour, accumulates in fetal organs, translates into spike protein, and persists in fetal tissues after birth. This study provides the first in vivo confirmation that mRNA injections cross the placenta, directly reaching the fetus. So how about that? There's some concern over the vaccine technology. They might not be as safe and they might not be as effective as we were always told they were. What the F is that? How is that even possible? I'll probably be cited for disinformation for reading an article from a science journal. I've gotten used to it. It's all good. Here is another from this week. Yesterday, Fox News, Trump signs late-night executive order abolishing handful of federal advisory boards. Okay? And so I don't know where the rest of this article went, but I have another one, so we'll just use that. the point ultimately is, oh, darn, maybe it was that one. Hold for processing. Let me see if I can get a better version of this. For whatever reason, there was a show more option before, and the show more option has disappeared. So let me see if maybe the archive version will get us where we need to go, and it will not. All right, so we're going to pass by that. There was an advisory board under the Department of Health and Human Services, I believe, that Trump was disbanding among the handful that he is abolishing, as that article says. Then we have this from the Washington Post. Vaccine safety panel, long criticized by RFK Jr., told to postpone meeting. Trump administration has directed the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to indefinitely postpone a public meeting of its vaccine advisory panel, a key forum for the nation's discussion of information about vaccine safety and effectiveness. The decision came Thursday from officials at the Department of Health and Human Services, CDC's parent agency led by anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has long criticized the panel and the CDC. So they were supposed to have a meeting to discuss vaccines. Public health groups criticized the postponement of the Federal Advisory Committee meeting, saying it would delay action and public discussion on pressing infectious disease threats, including one of the worst flu seasons in years. So you see that it's not really hurting the bureaucracy. It is, but they're only telling you this because it's really ultimately hurting you. Trump is making it so that you are less prepared to deal with any potential for these pandemics that might emerge. We have a new coronavirus coming. You just heard that the flu season, this most infectious flu season that we've ever had, especially compared to 2020 when it disappeared completely. And the panel members were scheduled to vote on recommendations for the use of the chikungunya vaccine, a new meningitis vaccine, and new recommendations on influenza and vaccines for RSV. Oh, man. What are we going to do? They're not going to be able to make recommendations, and he's already cut off their ability to communicate with the public. Then this from the Daily Mail. On Wednesday, COVID vaccine faces ban for all Americans in radical U-turn by Trump. COVID vaccines could be suspended for all age groups in America under radical new plans backed by key health figures in the Trump administration. Several experts poised for top jobs in U.S. health agencies subscribe to the disputed idea that the shots are causing widespread side effects and deaths. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who has been nominated to lead the National Institutes of Health, has backed a petition calling for the mRNA vaccines to be paused and retested. He is one of the signatories of the Hope Accord, which claims there is a causal link between the mRNA shots and an alarming rise in excess deaths worldwide. And so we'll see how he does on that. And again, he's one of those people that I have high hopes for. I hope he implements the Trump agenda. I hope he gets where we need to go. I hope he's telling the truth about all this stuff. He was a go-to for the controlled opposition side in 2020. And to the extent that we aligned with the interests of the controlled opposition, people like Jay Bhattacharya were made heroes, which is probably why he has his job now. Or it could be because his role in all of this, including his current position, was determined when they were coming up with this whole agenda. He played the controlled opposition side. He didn't get us where we needed to go, but he did seem very base and red-pilled compared to the other side of the controlled opposition. Not casting aspersions, just saying, we got to watch these people. They were helpful in making the argument against the Uniparty left and against the regime's main COVID agenda. But they didn't get us out of the controlled opposition dynamic. And if someone's not getting us out when there's a path out, we have to wonder why. Donald Trump, as a catalyst to the awakening, has continually been the one to lead us out. And it's not because he says it directly and only says that thing. It's because he causes us to understand that, look for the route out, and then find it. And that pattern has repeated over and over and over again. Meanwhile, people who just represent the controlled opposition dynamic have never attempted to break us all the way out. And that is why I'm concerned. Because if Donald Trump was out of the picture, all of the rest of this would still be happening. It was still scripted to happen as the controlled opposition for the same Great Reset agenda. They can't just script one side. They have to script both sides. And that's exactly what they did. And to the extent that people want the incentives of the controlled opposition, the people will naturally conform to that side themselves, believing that they have found their allies. Now, why is all of this coming back out now? I can't guarantee you that's why. I'm looking at a pattern that I see. You might not see it, all good. And I am responding to it through my lens. And you might not see it the same way, all good. What I see is over the last 4 years, and particularly throughout 2022 and on, when the Ron op began in full with people like the DeeSantis simps, and then people who everybody thought were on our side, like Tracy Beans, going out and blaming Donald Trump for the COVID vaccines, as if he's the one who made people take it. Donald Trump didn't make anybody take that. In fact, Donald Trump and the way he's handled this thing is what has caused the vaccine regime in full to collapse. And it is at the point of collapse. He's brought RFK in and he's done all the other things that he would need to satisfy that normie contingent. But I think even blaming him for it at all is taking the responsibility off of people. People took the vaccine for whatever reason they took it. And then they said, oh, it must be okay because Donald Trump says all right things about it sometimes. And he talks about how Operation Warp Speed was a good thing. And it probably was a good thing. And getting the vaccine to end the COVID narrative may have been unfortunately necessary to avoid the continued destruction of the lives of hundreds of millions of people worldwide. And if that was the price, fine. He didn't make anyone take it. No one can say that Donald Trump is the reason they took the vaccine or that Donald Trump is the reason the vaccines existed. If the pandemic is a plandemic, then certainly the vaccines were some part in that process. And understanding that the stolen election would have happened regardless, well, the vaccine was going to get out there somehow, and it would be mandated somehow. And because Donald Trump pushed that forward, then you have the opportunity to blame Donald Trump for the vaccine problems. And that is what the regime will ultimately do. They will protect the vaccine system itself and give this one away and say it was because Donald Trump rushed it to market. But there aren't good vaccines. And here's where I'm going to get another strike on the on Google Video. But, you know, he's definitely supported polio and what's the other one? MMR or something. RFK supports those as well. All right. Now the scientific journals are coming out against the COVID vaccine, and Donald Trump will be blamed for that. And he often will protect himself through these narrative efforts from these potential narrative attacks that he knows are coming. And so I would suggest that is what we see here. This is Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, yesterday in the White House for that same Black History Month event. Why is Donald Trump recognizing Albert Bourla in a Black History Month event? Let's see.
I have the head of Pfizer here, so I want to thank him. One of the great people, one of the great businessmen. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to congratulate our newly sworn-in Secretary of Housing.
So, is that a humiliation ritual? It could be. Donald Trump recognizes the CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, and the crowd recognizes him with pervasive booing that lasted for about 30 seconds as Donald Trump smiled and let them do it and then eventually moved on. He didn't protect Bourla. He looked over at him and smiled like, hey, what'd you think was going to happen? So, all right, guys, I'm going to check the chat and then we'll begin to wrap up for the day. I actually have one more video, and I'll do the video from before. But before we go, let's also just mention Rumble and Rumble Premium. This sponsorship is from Rumble, one that is incredibly important to the survival of the company. When Rumble first started in 2013, they built the platform for the small creator. They didn't censor or have biases. They were fair and treated all creators equally. No one thought platforms would censor political conversation or censor opinions on COVID, but they did. Facebook admitted they fell to pressure from the Biden and Harris administration. Rumble did not. They held the line. They are attacked daily for giving us a voice to talk to you. They are attacked in corporate media. They are attacked by governments like France. They are attacked from brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech. Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive with brand advertisers. They don't get much of it. Watching this show on Rumble is the most they can ask from you. But if you really believe in this fight and you have the means, one major way you can help Rumble survive is by joining Rumble Premium. Join the community that believes in the First Amendment and believes in our human right to free speech. Rumble is offering $10 off with the promo code STUDIO when you purchase an annual subscription. Go to rumble.com/premium and use promo code STUDIO. Like I said, if you have the means and believe in the cause, now is the time to join Rumble Premium. If you don't have the means, we are just happy you watch us on Rumble. And it's true, Rumble has been very good to us, not only me, but in allowing me a place to host my content that has never censored me in any way. But they've also been very helpful to Badlands and to John. And so I really appreciate them for doing all of that. And I want to leave with one more video. So I said earlier, I think, when we were briefly discussing Ukraine, that one of the ways that I look at Volodymyr Zelensky and our boy Yuhu down in Israel is as people who are controlled and to some extent Judas goats who are leading the conservative establishment, the regime establishment, the neocons, as well as the neoliberals, into indefensible positions in the eyes of the American public. They have both been critical in exposing World War II history, the history of Israel, and how much we are lied to about that by the political establishment, by the Uniparty, and of course by the global regime and their global propaganda media. I'm not saying either of them are good people, okay? They are both, well, not so much Zelensky. Trump is being attacked, or Netanyahu, I'm sorry, our boy Yuhu, is being attacked in the same ways that Donald Trump was attacked. And we've seen that in other leaders who Donald Trump recognizes as sovereign allies, or at least people who are doing what he needs them to do, and then ultimately what we need them to do. Volodymyr Zelensky was a hero. He was the next Churchill. Now they're starting to really worry about him, and they're starting to suggest replacements for him. And every time the American public agrees that we've spent too much money there, Volodymyr Zelensky says, what do you mean? It's not even getting to me. In fact, we need more. The Europeans say, we're going to keep peacekeeping forces there. as Russia says no peacekeeping forces will be accepted. And then Zelensky says 25,000, 30,000. We need 125,000. You guys aren't even close. You might as well give the whole continent away to Russia, which makes them have to warmonger more. It is my belief that they don't want to be taking these positions, that people in the mainstream, neocons and neoliberals, do not want to be taking such hard pro-Ukraine and pro-Israel positions, but they have no other choice because the regime demands that. They need to hold on to their proxy state in Ukraine. They need to hold on to their proxy state in Israel. They need to hold on to all their proxy states, and they're losing them. And so regardless of whether or not I'm right about this, the net effect of the Ukraine war narrative and the Israel paragliding go-kart incident narrative and everything that has come from that has been a mass worldwide awakening to the lies that we've been told for decades, not centuries, about what's happening in Ukraine and about what's happening in Israel and the Middle East broadly. So have a look at this. This is new. Somehow this is new.
We can confirm that baby Kfir Bibas, aged just 10 months old, and his older brother Ariel, aged 4, were both brutally murdered by terrorists while being held hostage in Gaza, no later than November 2023. These two innocent children were taken hostage alive together with their mother Shiri from their home on October 7th, 2023. Contrary to Hamas's lies, Ariel and Kfir were not killed in an airstrike. Ariel and Kfir Bibas were murdered by terrorists in cold blood. The terrorists did not shoot the two young boys. They killed them with their bare hands.
So more atrocity stories. They just found out that what they thought was a minor atrocity is actually a greater atrocity. And so the war needs to go forever. These videos are absurd. Oh, by the way, one last thing. Ash told me this just as I was about to get on the air this afternoon. Maybe she even included a link, and if she did, I'm going to pull it up. Unbelievable stuff here. Here it is. Oh, wow. What a headline. This is from the New York Times. And then we will actually get out of here. Oh, wrong link. Hold on one second. New York Times yesterday, with explosive goggles, Ukraine sought to blast Russian drone operators. It was a novel Ukrainian spy plot inspired by what Israeli intelligence had pulled off with exploding wireless devices, and Hezbollah militants hide tiny bombs in the goggles that Russian soldiers use to control drones. Donate those goggles to the Russian military under the guise of humanitarian aid, then wait for the explosions. The news agency TASS reported the suspected sabotage of the goggles earlier this month, and on Thursday, a senior Ukrainian official confirmed that Ukraine's military intelligence agency, known as the HUR, developed the scheme. The Ukrainian outlet Suspilna reported on the explosions earlier Thursday. The Ukrainian plot did not have the same public results as the Israeli one, which killed dozens of people and wounded thousands across Lebanon, including civilians. So, the ridiculous pager attack was about to be made even more ridiculous. The Ukrainians were going to plant tiny bombs in their goggles, and when the Russian drone operators wore them, they would explode in their eyes. How about that? And I'm getting one more because I just remembered this. Let's cap it off with this one. Netanyahu gifted Trump a golden pager during their meeting in Washington. To President Donald Trump, reads the inscription, our greatest friend and greatest ally, our boy Yoo-hoo. And the pager says, press with both hands. What a beautiful, beautiful gift that is. Commemorating their ingenious attack that really took it to Hamas. I'm sorry. Maybe you believe these things. I don't. Can I prove to you that they're fake? No, I cannot. But this is preposterous, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And with that, I think I've checked the chat. Nothing else to get to in there. I will be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
Ah!
And what's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Can we stop this cruel game and allow the boy to keep one shred of dignity? For God's sakes! I can't stand to see him in all this pain! You vicious bastards! Let him move in with you! Is it so bad to see somebody happy? So just let him move in! For the love of God, let the boy move in with you! Good Lord!
And I will not let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What? In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the rain.